Tonight, do not try to change your reality. Change the place within yourself from which you are meeting it. That may sound like a very small distinction, but I tell you it is the beginning of a completely different relationship with life. For most people come to the end of the day carrying the same identity with which they began it. They lie down in another room, beneath another hour, but inwardly they are still standing in the office, still hearing the difficult conversation, still looking at the figures upon the page, still waiting for the letter, still wondering what another person meant, still trying to discover what must happen tomorrow in order for them to feel different. The body is in bed, but consciousness has not come home. And so tonight I do not ask you to work harder upon your life. I do not ask you to imagine with greater force. I do not ask you to repeat words until they become empty from repetition. I do not ask you to persuade yourself of something you cannot yet feel. I ask you to do something quieter. For this night, cease being the person who is struggling with the problem. Not forever. Not through denial. Not by pretending that there are no practical matters waiting for you in the morning. Simply for this hour. Stop carrying that person any farther. The man who spent the day worrying about money has done enough worrying. The woman who spent the day wondering whether she is loved has done enough wondering. The one who tried to make a decision, change another person, obtain an answer, find employment, repair a mistake, or understand why something has not happened, has done enough for one day. Let that version of you sit down. Let that version of you become quiet. You are not abandoning your life. You are refusing to spend the night rehearsing the same identity that produced the same emotional world all day. And if you have been searching for a way to shift what you call your frequency, understand what I mean by that word tonight. I am not asking you to imagine invisible waves leaving the body. I am speaking of something far more intimate and practical. By frequency, I mean the inner tone to which you continually return, the feeling of yourself when you are not trying to impress anyone, the expectation that rises automatically when something uncertain occurs, the quiet conclusion you make about who you are, the position from which you interpret the world. That is the frequency I want you to notice. And if you change that tone, even gently, you begin changing the world you are capable of experiencing. Before we go farther tonight, make one small outward decision that corresponds with the inward one you are beginning to make. Subscribe to this channel, not as an empty habit, but as a quiet declaration that you are no longer willing to keep returning unconsciously to the same old state. Let the act be simple. Let it mean, I am choosing what I repeatedly allow into consciousness. Subscribe now, and let that small decision stand for something larger. That from this night forward, you are willing to become more deliberate about the state from which you live. Then forget the action. Do not make it important. The important thing is the state. For the whole mystery of change is not that you must somehow attack the world until it becomes different. The greater mystery is that the world is continually being encountered through a certain version of you, and you have mistaken that version for yourself. You say, this is simply how I am. But is it? Or is it how you have learned to return? You say, I have always worried about these things, but always may simply mean that the road has been walked so often that you no longer notice your feet upon it. You say, I cannot help expecting disappointment. But expectation is a state, and states can be left. This is what I want you to understand before sleep begins to carry away the sharper edges of thought. You are not condemned to fall asleep as the same psychological person who woke this morning. You may have the same name, the same room, the same body, the same circumstances waiting outside the night. But inwardly you can cease returning to the old seat. Think of a theater. There may be many seats in the room, but if you sit in the same one every evening, you begin to think it is yours. It is not yours. It is simply where you have been sitting. A state is like that. You have occupied worry so often that worry seems personal. You have occupied waiting so often that waiting seems natural. You have occupied insecurity so often that insecurity seems truthful. You have occupied struggle so often that ease feels suspicious. But I tell you, familiarity is not identity. You are the one who occupies the state. You are not the state itself. And this is why night can become so valuable. During the day, the outer world continually calls your attention. Someone speaks, a bill arrives, a telephone rings, a person looks at you in a certain way. A decision must be made. You react before you remember that you have a choice. But now the room is quieter. The demands have withdrawn. The world is no longer asking you to answer every minute. And in this interval, you can begin to notice who has been answering for you. Perhaps it has been the frightened one, perhaps the rejected one, perhaps the one who expects difficulty, perhaps the one who feels overlooked, perhaps the one who says, I must make everything happen myself, perhaps the one who says, nothing changes unless I force it. Do not condemn that version of you. It has simply become practiced. You do not need to fight it tonight. Fighting it would only keep your attention upon it. Instead, let it become unnecessary. Suppose you have been worried about money. Do not try immediately to feel wealthy. That jump may feel theatrical. Begin more quietly. Ask yourself, if I were no longer the person who expects financial danger in every ordinary event, how would I lie here? Perhaps the answer is not excitement. Perhaps the answer is that your stomach would not be preparing for tomorrow. Perhaps your mind would not be counting the same figures again. Perhaps you would simply allow 1 hour to exist without financial calculation. That is already another state. Suppose you have been worried about love. Do not force yourself to feel adored. Ask, if I were no longer the one waiting to discover whether I am wanted, what would disappear from this moment? Perhaps the need to replay the conversation. Perhaps the urge to interpret silence. Perhaps the imaginary argument. Perhaps the question, what do they really feel? Let one question disappear. That is already movement. Suppose you have been worried about work. You do not need tonight to manufacture an employer, an opportunity, or an answer. Ask, how would I rest if I knew I had a place in the world where my abilities were useful? Perhaps your breathing would become less hurried. Perhaps tomorrow would feel less like an examination. Perhaps you would not be trying to prove your worth to an invisible committee inside your head. Let that inner committee adjourn for the night. You see, people often believe that a new reality must begin with a new event. I tell you, it begins much earlier. It begins when an old event loses the power to summon the same old version of you. A bill appears, but perhaps it no longer summons panic. A silence occurs, but perhaps it no longer summons abandonment. A delay happens, but perhaps it no longer summons the sentence, nothing ever works for me. That is change, quiet change. And because it is quiet, many people overlook it. They wait for the dramatic evidence. They want the new house, the new relationship, the new position, the new amount of money before they will admit that anything has shifted. But the beginning is often far less visible. The beginning is that you no longer answer life from the same interior place. And tonight, you do not even need to prove that you can remain in a new state tomorrow. Tonight concerns tonight. That is all. I want you to stop turning every spiritual idea into a burden of performance. You hear, change your state, and immediately you ask, how long must I hold it? You hear, assume the end, and you ask, what if I doubt? You hear, feel it real, and you begin examining yourself to see whether your feeling is sufficiently intense. Now you have created another problem. No. Let it become simpler. For a little while, stop rehearsing the old you. You do not need to construct a magnificent new one. Just stop feeding the old one with another hour of repetition. If you have spent all day saying inwardly, I do not know what will happen, perhaps tonight you need only replace it with, I do not need to know tonight. If you have spent all day saying, I must solve this, perhaps tonight, nothing requires solving in this bed. If you have spent all day thinking, I hope they choose me, perhaps tonight, I know what it feels like to belong. These are not magic sentences. They are invitations into different rooms of consciousness. The sentence matters only if it helps you move. This is why I speak of the inner tone. The words may change. The tone is what you are learning to recognize. There is a tone of waiting. There is a tone of possession. There is a tone of fear. There is a tone of security. There is a tone of pleading. There is a tone of belonging. There is a tone of constantly asking life for permission. and there is another tone that quietly says, I am here. Not I will be, not perhaps one day. I am here. You do not need to shout that. The more natural the state becomes, the less noise it requires. A man who knows where he lives does not repeat his address to himself all day. A woman who knows she is loved does not need every passing hour to confirm it. A person who belongs somewhere does not stand at the doorway asking every few minutes whether they are still permitted inside. Possession is quieter than desire. Certainty is quieter than pleading. And perhaps the shift you need tonight is not toward greater excitement, but toward greater quiet. If you call that a change of frequency, then let the frequency become quieter. The old state may have been loud, urgent, watchful, always asking, always checking, always anticipating. The new state may feel almost uneventful. That is not failure. That may be the very thing you have been seeking. Imagine how a person feels after receiving an answer they had waited weeks to receive. At first, perhaps there is relief. Then life continues. They eat, they speak with someone, they read, they prepare for sleep. The answer is no longer the center of consciousness. This is one reason I so often tell you to go to the end. At the end, the thing you once desired no longer dominates you. It has become part of life. So tonight, rather than trying to make something happen, become less fascinated by the fact that it has not happened yet. That alone changes your position. You may say, but if I stop thinking about it, am I giving up? No. There is a tremendous difference between giving up the desire and giving up the strain. You may keep the desire. Let the strain go. You may know what you want. Let the desperation go. You may prefer a certain end. Let the constant mental supervision go. You do not lose the destination because you stop staring at the road. Sometimes you finally begin traveling when you stop standing over the map. Tonight, let the map fold. You have examined it enough. Let tomorrow bring whatever practical step belongs to tomorrow. Tonight has another purpose. Tonight you become less loyal to the old self. Perhaps for years you have been faithful to an identity you never consciously chose. The one who struggles, the one who waits, the one who gets close but never arrives, the one who is always trying to change. Notice something about that last identity. The one who is always trying to change never actually becomes. Trying itself becomes the identity. So tonight, stop trying to become. For a little while, simply cease being what you no longer wish to continue. Do not solve the whole question. You may not yet know who the new you is in every detail. Good. You do not need a complete biography of the person you are becoming. Maybe you only know one thing. The new you does not carry this particular fear to bed. Then begin there. The new you does not replay that conversation. Begin there. The new you does not need tomorrow's answer before sleeping tonight. Begin there. The new you does not measure worth by one person's response. Begin there. The new you can let uncertainty exist without immediately translating it into disaster. Begin there. Do you feel how practical this becomes? You are not changing an invisible universe by force. You are changing your relationship to consciousness. You are selecting another position. And a different position reveals a different world because you perceive, respond, imagine, choose, and interpret differently from it. What once looked threatening may look temporary. What once looked final may look unfinished. What once looked like rejection may look like one event. What once looked impossible may simply look unknown. The outer world need not transform before you are permitted to stand elsewhere within yourself. That is the freedom. Do not ask the world to move first. The world may still be sleeping in yesterday's arrangement. Let it. You do not have to wake it. You do not have to shake it. You do not have to command it tonight. Leave it where it is. Change where you stand. Perhaps nothing outside this room changes before morning. That is not your concern right now. The purpose of this night is not to produce evidence by sunrise. The purpose is far subtler, to no longer give the old state another unquestioned night of occupancy. For every night you lie down in the same assumptions, you make them familiar again. Every night you rehearse the same fear, you polish the path back to it. Every night you anticipate the same disappointment, you practice being the one disappointed. But tonight you can interrupt the rehearsal, not dramatically, quietly. The old scene begins. You do not finish it. The old conversation begins. You let it dissolve. The old question asks for another answer. You say, not tonight. That is enough. Not tonight. There is something very powerful in allowing consciousness to stop, not collapse, not surrender in defeat. Stop. You do not have to carry the whole architecture of your life into sleep. The bed is not a courtroom. It is not an office. It is not the place where tomorrow must be decided. Let it become the place where one identity loosens. I have told people again and again that imagination is not merely the faculty by which you picture things. It is the faculty by which you occupy states. Tonight, perhaps you need no picture at all. Maybe the state is felt in the absence of what you were doing before. No argument, no counting, no chasing, no waiting, no defending, no rehearsing. And in that absence, something else becomes possible. A little more room, a little more quiet, a little more freedom from the person who thought everything depended upon solving the next hour before it arrived. Let that freedom be your beginning. You do not have to change your life tonight. You do not have to shift the whole world before you sleep. You do not have to feel transformed. You do not have to know whether anything has worked. You need only become willing not to go to sleep as exactly the same psychological person who woke this morning. Leave one old reaction outside the night. Leave one old conclusion unfinished. Leave one old fear without another rehearsal. That is enough. The rest can come later. For now, let the day loosen its hold. Let the version of you who carried it begin to grow quiet. You are still here, but you do not have to remain where you were within yourself. And tonight, that is where the change begins. There is a question I want you to carry quietly into this night, because it reaches deeper than the question, what do I want? The question is this: who have I been being while I wait for my life to change? Do not hurry to answer it. Let the question remain with you for a moment. Who have I been being while I wait for my life to change? For a man may desire abundance and still spend every day inwardly being the man who is trying to get enough. A woman may desire love and still move through every relationship as the woman who is waiting to discover whether she will be chosen. A man may desire success and still enter every opportunity as the man hoping this time he will not be rejected. A woman may desire security and still meet every unexpected expense as the woman who expects something to go wrong. The desire is new, the identity is old, and then we wonder why life seems to repeat itself. I tell you, the world continually encounters the state you occupy, not merely the words you occasionally repeat. This is not punishment. It is not some external power judging whether your thoughts are pure enough. It is far simpler. You interpret, choose, speak, react, expect, remember, and imagine from a state. And because you do these things from a state, that state continually enters your experience through you. Suppose a man says every morning, I am prosperous. That sentence may be beautiful. But when a bill arrives, what happens? Does he become the prosperous man handling an ordinary obligation? Or does the old man immediately return? The shoulders tighten, the mind races. He calculates the same figures 3 times. He imagines what might happen if something else goes wrong. Then he says, why is prosperity not appearing? But perhaps prosperity was never given the opportunity to become a state. It remained a sentence. The old identity remained the place from which life was met. Or suppose a woman says, I am loved. Then someone does not telephone when expected. Immediately she begins interpreting. Perhaps I said too much. Perhaps they have lost interest. Perhaps I was foolish to believe things were different. She may repeat, I am loved, while simultaneously listening inwardly for rejection. Which of these feels more like home to her? That is the important question, not which sentence is prettier, which state is familiar. The world will meet the familiar state again and again, until another state becomes more natural. Do not hear this as criticism. I am not asking you to blame yourself for every event that has ever occurred. That would be another prison. I am asking you to observe something you can actually change. The place from which you meet the event. Two people may encounter the same delay and live in two completely different worlds. One receives no answer to a letter and says, "There it is again. People never respond to me. Nothing ever moves." The other receives no answer and says, "There is no answer yet." Same fact, different state. One turns a delay into identity. The other lets it remain a delay. And because the first person is already the one who expects neglect, every silence becomes evidence. Because the second is not psychologically dependent upon the silence, the same event does not acquire the same meaning. This is how states perpetuate themselves, not through magic tricks, through the entire manner in which consciousness meets experience. You do not merely see the world, you meet it as someone, and that someone matters. Perhaps you have never asked yourself who has been meeting your life. You ask, why does this keep happening? But not, who keeps arriving at this happening? That is where I want your attention tonight. Suppose you desire a new position. You imagine the office. You hear congratulations. You say, I have wonderful work. Then the next day you go to speak with an employer. Before you even enter the room, what identity goes in with you? Is it the one who feels naturally useful, or the one hoping desperately to convince someone of his value? The words spoken in the interview may be almost identical. The suit may be the same. The qualifications may be the same. But inwardly one man says, I hope you allow me to belong here. The other says, I know I have something of value to offer. One is petitioning for identity. The other is expressing identity. Do you see the difference? The state comes first. The world then encounters the state through your voice, your expectation, your interpretation, your willingness to act, your willingness to remain when something is uncertain, and your willingness to move on when something no longer belongs. This is why changing circumstances alone may not free a person. A man may leave one job because he feels undervalued. He finds another. For a few weeks, everything is new. Then slowly he becomes once more the man who expects to be overlooked. He notices every omission. He interprets every correction as disrespect. He compares himself with everyone. Soon the new office begins to feel remarkably like the old office. Not because the two offices are identical, because the same man entered both. A woman may leave one relationship believing the person was the cause of all her insecurity. She meets someone new. At first there is relief. Then one evening, the new person is tired and quiet. The old identity awakens. They are pulling away. A delayed letter becomes danger. A small disagreement becomes evidence. Soon she is living in the old relationship without the old person. The scenery changed. The state did not. This is why I say that changing your reality and changing your state cannot finally be separated. You may alter the furniture of life and still live in the same psychological room. You may move to another city and carry the old city inside you. You may meet new people and introduce them to the same old self. You may earn more money and still remain the one who fears there will never be enough. You may receive praise and still remain the one who waits anxiously for the next criticism. You may be loved and still remain the one who is looking for the moment love disappears. Then the outer change arrives, but you cannot inhabit it. This is important. Some people think manifestation means bringing new things toward the old self. I tell you that a deeper change occurs when the self that needed those things in order to become different is itself transformed. The old self says, give me security, and then I will feel secure. The new state says, I begin with security. The old self says, choose me, and then I will feel worthy. The new state says, I no longer wait for another person to tell me who I am. The old self says, let me succeed, and then I will trust myself. The new state says, I meet opportunity as one who belongs in success. This is not arrogance, it is inner placement. A man who feels worthy does not need to think himself superior. A woman who feels loved does not need to believe everyone must love her. Security does not mean denying uncertainty. Prosperity does not mean pretending every account is full. The state is not theatrical exaggeration. It is the quiet assumption about yourself beneath the circumstance. You have one now. Everyone does. The question is whether it is the one you wish to continue. If you want to know your present state, do not listen only to the affirmations you deliberately choose. Listen to what you say inwardly when you are surprised. That is often very revealing. A plan changes unexpectedly. What rises? Of course, nothing ever goes smoothly. There is a state speaking. Someone compliments you. What rises? They are only being polite. There is a state. An opportunity appears. What rises? It probably will not work. A friend is quiet. They must be upset with me. Money arrives. Better hold tightly to it, because more may not come. Something good happens. I wonder how long this will last. These small sentences are not insignificant. They are windows. They show you the person who has been living beneath the words you consciously prefer. Again, do not attack that person. Observation is enough. If you discover that you have been living as the one who expects loss, do not say, I have failed. Say, now I see the state. If you discover that you have been the one who is always waiting, say, now I see the state. If you discover you have been the one who feels invisible, overworked, rejected, forgotten, financially threatened, or unable to trust good things, say, now I see where I have been standing. There is freedom in seeing. You cannot consciously leave a room you refuse to admit you are in. But once you see the room, you do not need to burn it down. You can walk out. Tonight, we are learning how to walk out quietly. And perhaps one of the strangest things you will discover is that the old state may continue speaking after you have chosen another. That does not mean you are still trapped. Suppose you move from one house into another. For several days you may still reach instinctively for a light switch where it stood in the old house. Your hand remembers. That does not mean you still live there. In the same way, an old psychological state may produce old movements after you have begun leaving it. An old fear appears, an old sentence rises, an old reaction begins. Do not say, nothing has changed. Perhaps this is simply habit reaching for the old switch. You can notice and return. That is all. You are not required to become another person in one dramatic moment. You are becoming less available to an old identity. That is already movement. Consider the person who has always thought of himself as unlucky. Something inconvenient occurs. He immediately smiles bitterly and says, that is my luck. Notice how quickly he claims the event. He does not merely experience inconvenience. He makes it personal. He takes an ordinary event and places it inside a lifelong identity. Now suppose something fortunate occurs. He may say, that was unusual. Do you see? Misfortune is identity. Good fortune is exception. The state decides which evidence is allowed to be normal. This is why changing the state changes far more than what you think about consciously. It changes what you accept as natural. The one who believes himself loved does not experience affection as an astonishing interruption of loneliness. Affection fits. The one who sees himself as capable does not treat success as an accident that must soon be corrected. Success fits. The one who feels at home in life does not interpret every closed door as banishment. Another place can open. Belonging remains. The state becomes a kind of inner atmosphere in which events acquire meaning. If you call this frequency, then this is what I want the word to mean for you. Not an invisible measurement, not a mystical number, not a force you must strain to increase. It is the atmosphere of self, the tone beneath the sentence, the expectation beneath the action, the identity beneath the desire. Change that, and you change the way the world is met. And when the world is met differently, possibilities that once could not be recognized may become visible. Choices that once felt impossible may feel natural. People may respond differently because you are no longer approaching them with the same fear. You may stop chasing what required chasing only because you believed it could leave. You may stop accepting arrangements that match the old conception of yourself. You may finally notice an opportunity the old state would have dismissed. All of this begins inwardly. This is why tonight matters. During the day, you are busy meeting events. At night, you can meet the one who has been meeting them. Who have I been being while I wait for my life to change? Let the question return. Who have I been being while I wait for love? Perhaps the one who believes love is elsewhere. Who have I been being while I wait for money? Perhaps the one who believes supply must always be chased. Who have I been being while I wait for success? Perhaps the one who believes success is a judgment another person must pronounce. Who have I been being while I wait for peace? Perhaps the one who believes every problem must be solved before peace is permitted. Who have I been being while I wait for confidence? Perhaps the one who continually searches the world for proof that confidence is justified. This is not about finding the wrong answer. It is about finally seeing the one who has been waiting. Because the one who is always waiting creates a peculiar reality. Everything appears one step away. The answer is coming. The relationship is almost secure. The money is almost enough. The opportunity may happen. The new life is near. Tomorrow. Soon. One day. The waiting state can contain very beautiful hopes, but it remains waiting. And if you live there long enough, even hope becomes a form of postponement. Tonight, experiment with something else. What if you did not need to be the one waiting for 1 hour? Not because everything has visibly arrived, because inwardly you are allowed to occupy another place before the evidence changes. What if abundance tonight means simply that you are not the one begging life for enough? What if love means you are no longer evaluating your worth through another person's silence? What if success means you no longer enter tomorrow as someone asking whether he deserves to be there? What if peace means you stop making every unresolved matter a condition for rest? These are shifts in identity, quiet ones, and they are available before sleep. Perhaps your circumstances will look the same tomorrow morning. I do not ask you to deny that possibility. But suppose the circumstances meet someone slightly different. Suppose the unpaid account meets someone who no longer calls himself helpless. Suppose the unanswered letter meets someone who no longer calls silence rejection. Suppose the employer meets someone who no longer apologizes inwardly for wanting a place. Suppose the mirror meets someone who no longer searches his own face for evidence of failure. Then reality is already meeting a different person. That is where change begins to become embodied in ordinary life. Not in grand declarations, in who answers the telephone, who opens the letter, who walks into the room, who hears the criticism, who receives the compliment, who pays the bill, who wakes tomorrow morning. Same name, different state. This is the movement. And you do not need tonight to decide every characteristic of this new state. Perhaps you only choose one. I am no longer the one who expects rejection. Let that be enough. Or, I am no longer the one who believes everything must be difficult. Enough. Or, I am no longer the one waiting for permission to feel secure. Enough. Notice I am not even asking you yet to replace the old identity with a magnificent declaration. Sometimes it is easier first to stop renewing the contract with what you no longer wish to be. The old state says, "This is who we are." You may answer, "Not necessarily." That little opening is powerful. Not necessarily. Perhaps life has always felt difficult. Not necessarily forever. Perhaps relationships have repeated themselves. Not necessarily again. Perhaps you have reacted with fear for years. Not necessarily tonight. A state wants continuity. You do not owe it continuity. You are consciousness. You may move. And perhaps as you lie here, you can feel how many things you have mistaken for fixed characteristics that are really repeated positions. I am anxious. Perhaps you have frequently occupied anxiety. I am unlucky. Perhaps you have interpreted events through that state. I am unwanted. Perhaps you have practiced looking for evidence of exclusion. I am always behind. Perhaps comparison became a room you entered every day. The statement "I am" makes a temporary state sound like permanent identity. Be careful what you fasten to it. Tonight, loosen some of those old attachments. You do not need to replace them all. Let one become less convincing. That is enough. The world has been meeting the person you kept being. Tomorrow, perhaps it meets someone slightly different. Not because you perform, not because you pretend. Because you stop unconsciously returning to the same inner address. And sleep can help, because in sleep you are no longer required to defend the old identity. No one is asking you to explain yourself. No one is asking for your history. No employer is interviewing you. No loved one is deciding your worth. No account is speaking. No letter is asking to be interpreted. For these hours, the world grows quiet enough for you to become less loyal to yesterday's version of yourself. Let that happen. Do not force a new personality. You are not acting upon a stage. You are simply choosing the state from which tomorrow will be met. Perhaps only one feeling, a little more belonging, a little less waiting, a little more certainty, a little less need for approval, a little more ease, a little less expectation of struggle. That is enough for tonight. And if the old self returns before you sleep, do not be surprised. It has returned many times before. Let it speak, then ask gently, is this who I choose to be now, or only who I have practiced being? There is no accusation in the question, only freedom. Who have I been being while I wait for my life to change? And perhaps, more importantly now, who would I be if I stopped waiting for life to change before I allowed myself to become different? Let that question remain. No need to answer it perfectly. The answer may not come as words. It may come as the first quiet moment in which you notice that you are no longer meeting the night from exactly the same place. There is something very important I want you to understand about the state you are leaving behind. It does not need your approval in order to continue. It does not need you to love it. It does not need you to believe consciously that it is good for you. It asks for only one thing, your continued participation. A state does not ask whether you love it. It asks only whether you continue occupying it. You may hate the condition in which you find yourself and still participate in the state that corresponds to it every day. You may dislike worry and still rehearse worry. You may dislike rejection and still anticipate rejection. You may dislike financial pressure and still return mentally to the same frightened calculations. You may dislike loneliness and still conduct conversations within yourself in which you are always the one abandoned, overlooked, forgotten, or waiting. You do not have to stand before a mirror and declare, I choose fear. Fear asks for nothing so formal. It needs only the familiar reaction. Something uncertain happens, and you answer it as you answered yesterday. Someone does not write, and you immediately give the silence the old meaning. An unexpected expense appears, and your mind travels down the same old road. Someone speaks carelessly, and the old conversation begins inside you before the outer conversation has even ended. A plan changes, and you hear yourself say, I knew something would go wrong. That is participation. It is not dramatic. That is why it can continue unnoticed. A state is renewed in small moments. You feed it with interpretation. You feed it with memory. You feed it with the conversations you repeat when no one else is present. You feed it with the future you automatically expect. You feed it each time you take one present fact and place it inside the old story of yourself. And because this process is so familiar, you may believe you are merely observing reality, but often you are participating in a state while calling the participation observation. Let me show you what I mean. A letter has not arrived. That is an event. Then the mind says, they have forgotten me. That is participation. The account contains less than you hoped. That is a fact. Then the mind says, there is never enough for me. Participation. Someone appears distant. That is behavior. Then you say inwardly, people always leave. Participation. An employer chooses another person. That is one decision. Then you think, I am never chosen. Participation. The state takes the event and recruits it. It says, come. Become another witness for the old identity. And if you are not awake inwardly, you agree. Soon you have collected a whole courtroom of evidence for a conclusion you never consciously chose. This happened, that happened. They said this, he did that. The money was short. The opportunity disappeared. The relationship ended. And each event is placed beneath one sentence. This is who I am. But I tell you, the sentence is not required. The event may remain. The identity need not be attached. This is how you begin withdrawing participation. Not by pretending the event did not happen, by refusing to let it renew the old state. Suppose something reminds you of an old disappointment tonight. The memory rises. You can see the room. You can hear the words. You remember exactly what you felt. What normally happens next? You do not merely remember the event, you re-enter it. The body changes, the face tightens. You begin answering someone who is not there. You imagine what you should have said. You imagine what they should have said. You relive the injustice. The event may have lasted 10 minutes years ago. Your participation has allowed it to live hundreds of additional hours. Do you see? Memory itself is not the enemy. Participation is the question. You may remember something without moving back into the person you were when it happened. That is freedom. You can say, yes, that occurred, and remain here. You do not have to climb back inside it. The old state will often invite you through memory, because memory feels like evidence. It says, you see, this happened before, therefore you know what will happen again. No, you know only what happened before. The future is not obligated to repeat a memory, simply because the memory is vivid. But if you repeatedly enter the same memory, feel the same identity, anticipate the same result, and react in the same manner, then you are carrying the old state forward yourself. That is why I do not ask you tonight to destroy the past. You cannot destroy what has happened. You can stop using it as instructions. This is a very different thing. Let yesterday become history rather than prophecy. The old state also feeds upon inner conversation. This is one of the most intimate forms of participation, because no one sees it. A man may appear calm during the day while conducting endless arguments inside. He meets someone who once offended him. Outwardly, nothing happens. Inwardly, he is already defending himself, explaining, proving, winning. He goes home. The conversation continues. He lies down. The other person is not present, yet the argument has followed him into bed. Who is sustaining it now? Not the other person. He is. The outer event ended hours ago. The state continues because participation continues. Or a woman waits for affection from someone. Outwardly, she says very little. Inwardly, she is constantly speaking. Why haven't you written? Do you still care? What did I do? Will you leave? Why am I never enough? Perhaps none of these words are ever spoken aloud. Yet she is living inside a relationship with rejection all day. Then she says, I want love. Of course she does, but she is participating inwardly in abandonment. Again, this is not blame, it is discovery. You cannot change what you cannot see. Once you see the participation, you gain another option. You do not have to replace every argument with a perfect affirmation. Sometimes the most powerful act is simply not to continue the conversation. Stop answering. Let the imaginary person remain silent. Let the courtroom empty. Let the old scene end without your final speech. You are allowed to withdraw. A state survives on your attention, much as a fire survives on fuel. You do not have to attack the fire with your bare hands. Stop adding wood. That is simpler. Every remembered insult is wood. Every rehearsed fear is wood. Every repeated sentence beginning with, this always happens to me, is wood. Every imagined future in which the old identity is confirmed is wood. Do not spend the night feeding what you say you wish to leave. Let the fire become smaller from neglect. This is very different from suppression. Suppression says, I must not think this. Then you watch for the thought. You become tense every time it appears. You make its appearance important. That is still participation. What I am suggesting is lighter. The thought comes. You notice. You do not continue. The memory comes. You recognize it. You do not enter. The fear speaks. You hear it. You do not appoint it as advisor. It may pass. A thought does not become a state merely because it visited. A feeling does not become identity because it arose. The state is strengthened when you repeatedly consent to live from it. This distinction can bring great relief. You may feel fear tomorrow. That does not mean you are back where you began. You may worry for 10 minutes. That does not mean you have failed. You may have an old reaction before you remember yourself. That does not mean the old state owns you. The question is not, did the old state appear? The question is, did I make it home again? You may visit it. You do not need to move back in. That is all. Suppose tomorrow an unexpected bill arrives. Perhaps your first sensation is tension. Very well. Years of habit may speak before deliberate consciousness. Then notice. This is the old participation. You do not have to say the words aloud, simply see it. Then instead of following the old sequence for another hour, let the sequence end earlier. Perhaps you say, I will attend to what is practical, but I will not make this one bill the definition of my supply. That is a new participation, not grand, not dramatic, but different. Or someone you care for remains silent longer than you expected. The old state begins immediately. They are losing interest. Pause. There is the invitation. Do you accept? Perhaps this time you do not. Perhaps you say, silence is silence. I do not need to build abandonment around it. And then you return to the state of being secure. This is how an old pattern weakens, not because you screamed louder than it, because you stopped completing it. The state expects you to finish the familiar sentence. Do not. Something goes wrong. The sentence begins, of course, because my life always. Stop there. You do not need to finish. Someone disappoints you. The sentence begins, people always. Leave it unfinished. Money becomes tight. The sentence begins, I will never. Do not give the future to the sentence. There is enormous power in an unfinished old conclusion. You interrupt the ritual. The old state waits for the familiar ending and does not receive it. This may seem almost too small to matter, but states are made of repetition. Change repetition, and you begin changing occupancy. You do not need one enormous act of consciousness. You need fewer renewals of the thing you no longer wish to inhabit. Think of a subscription you no longer want. It may continue automatically month after month because no one cancels it. The old state can be like that. Not consciously chosen each morning. Automatically renewed. Same expectation, same reaction, same inner language, same interpretation. And because it renews itself quietly, you assume it is simply you. Tonight, cancel the renewal. You do not need to know what the whole new life looks like. You simply stop agreeing to another full term of the old identity. No ceremony, no struggle. No, I do not need another night of this. That can be enough. You may discover that the old state has clever ways of trying to regain your participation. It may present itself as responsibility. If I stop worrying, I will become careless. No, concern and worry are not the same thing. You may attend to responsibility without rehearsing disaster. It may present itself as realism. If I stop expecting disappointment, I will be foolish. No. You can acknowledge uncertainty without pre-selecting pain. It may present itself as protection. If I imagine the worst, I will not be surprised. But now you have suffered the event, whether it happens or not. You have paid for protection with your peace. The old state may even present itself as loyalty. If I stop thinking about what happened, perhaps it means it did not matter. No, something can matter and still be finished. You can honor what you lived without living it again tonight. This is especially important when your state is tied to another person. Perhaps someone hurt you deeply. You may believe that if you stop replaying the story, they somehow escape responsibility. But the replay does not punish them. It occupies you. You may make whatever practical decisions are necessary. You may keep distance. You may speak. You may forgive or not yet be ready to forgive. But you do not have to carry the person into every private hour. You are allowed to reclaim the room inside yourself. The same is true of disappointment. You do not owe disappointment eternal tenancy merely because it once had a legitimate reason to enter. It entered. You felt it. Perhaps it taught you something. Now let it leave when it is ready. Do not keep setting a place for it at supper. Do not put it beside the bed. Do not ask it what tomorrow means. It does not know. The old state knows only how to reproduce itself. Fear interprets tomorrow through fear. Rejection interprets tomorrow through rejection. Lack interprets tomorrow through lack. The state is not an impartial prophet. It is a lens. And when you participate in it, you forget you are looking through glass. You say, this is simply what the world is. Perhaps not. Perhaps this is what the world looks like from here. Move. That is why I tell you again and again that you are not the state. You are the occupant. If the view has become intolerable, perhaps the first thing to change is not the landscape. Perhaps it is the room from which you are looking. Tonight, move inwardly. Do not pack luggage. Do not announce departure. Just stop sitting in the old chair. You may feel the temptation to return because it is familiar. Familiarity can feel strangely safe, even when the state itself is painful. A person may know exactly how to be worried. He knows what to think. He knows what to expect. He knows how the evening ends. Peace can initially feel unfamiliar because it leaves him without his usual occupation. What do I think about if I am not thinking about the problem? Perhaps nothing. That is allowed. You do not need to replace worry with another form of mental labor. Let there be empty space. The old state may dislike empty space because it cannot renew itself there. Good. Let the space remain. Perhaps tonight you notice that you are waiting for a familiar thought to arrive. The thought about money. The thought about that person. The thought about your future. The thought about the decision. Normally you meet it and continue the story. Tonight, perhaps you see it approaching and simply do not open the conversation. There is no need to say, go away. It may disappear on its own. This is a subtle kind of power, not domination, non-participation. The old state says, come, let us worry. You say nothing. Come, let us replay the conversation. Nothing. Come, let us predict tomorrow. Nothing. Come, let us prove again why nothing changes. Nothing. The silence is not emptiness, it is withdrawal of consent. And once consent is withdrawn repeatedly, the state begins losing its naturalness. You may still recognize it, but it no longer feels like home. That is progress. Perhaps the new state is not yet strong enough to describe. That is fine. There is often a quiet interval between leaving one state and feeling fully natural in another. Do not rush to fill it. You are allowed to be between familiar identities for a moment. You know what you no longer wish to continue. That is sufficient tonight. The new state can become clearer later. For now, stop strengthening the old one. This applies even to the way you tell your story to other people. Notice how often you repeat the same narrative because someone asks, how are things? You say, still the same. Then you explain the difficulty again. You hear yourself telling it. You watch the other person respond, and afterward the state feels more solid. You have just rehearsed it aloud. I am not saying you must lie. If someone needs accurate information, give it. If you need help, ask. But do not turn every conversation into another performance of the identity you wish to leave. You can state facts without reciting the whole mythology. Yes, that matter is still being handled. Enough? Yes, I am waiting for an answer. Enough? Yes, it has been a difficult week. Enough. You do not need to add, things are always difficult for me. That is the old state asking for another scene. Refuse the scene. This is how identity becomes lighter. Not through force, through fewer repetitions. And as night deepens, perhaps you can begin withdrawing even from the need to understand all of this intellectually. You have heard enough to recognize the movement. The old state does not need belief. It needs participation. So tonight, give it less. Less conversation, less rehearsal, less interpretation, less prophecy, less attention. You do not need to starve it angrily. Simply stop serving it dinner. Let it become hungry for your attention, and discover that you are no longer available in the same way. You have other places to rest. Perhaps you do not yet know exactly what they are, but you know this much. You do not need another night of being the one who waits for disaster. You do not need another night of being the one who argues with the past. You do not need another night of being the one who turns every uncertainty into rejection. You do not need another night of being the one who measures tomorrow with yesterday's ruler. Let the ruler fall from your hand. Nothing needs measuring now. The day is finished. The event is finished. The conversation is finished. The account can wait until morning. The unanswered letter can remain unanswered for the night. The person can be wherever they are. The decision can remain undecided. You do not need to participate in the old state simply because the outer matter is not yet resolved. That may be the greatest freedom of this evening. The circumstance can remain unfinished while your participation in fear ends now. The answer can remain unknown while your participation in rejection ends now. The money can remain unchanged, while your participation in helplessness ends now. The person can remain silent, while your participation in abandonment ends now. You are not waiting for the world to release you. You are releasing the state, quietly, without announcement, without struggle. And perhaps that is enough for this night. The old state may call once more. Let it call. You know its voice now. You know the invitation. You do not have to answer. You have occupied it long enough. Let it continue without you. And as you lie here, let the simplest truth remain. What you cease to participate in no longer receives the same life from you. No need to destroy it. No need to fight it. No need to prove anything. Withdraw, rest, and let the old state discover that tonight you are no longer available to keep it alive. There is another reason the old state can seem so powerful, even after you have begun to see it clearly. It is familiar. And familiarity has a peculiar way of disguising itself as truth. A thought repeated for many years does not arrive announcing, "I am only a habit." It arrives sounding like knowledge. A reaction practiced again and again does not say, "I am merely one possible response." It says, "This is simply how you are." An expectation carried through enough disappointments begins to sound less like expectation and more like prophecy. And so a man says, "I always struggle." A woman says, "People eventually leave." Another says, "Nothing ever comes easily to me." Another says, "I have never been fortunate with money." And perhaps the most binding sentence of all, "I am simply this kind of person." But I ask you tonight, what if you are not? What if you have only become extraordinarily familiar with one way of being? What if you have worn the state so long that you mistake the garment for the wearer? A coat may fit the body perfectly after years of use. It takes the shape of the shoulders. The sleeves crease where the arms bend. The cloth carries the movement of the one who wears it. After enough time, it may feel almost like part of the body. But the coat is not the man. Remove it, and the man remains. So it is with a state. You may have worn worry, until worry has learned the shape of your mind. You may have worn rejection, until every silence seems tailored to fit it. You may have worn struggle, until ease feels like clothing borrowed from someone else. You may have worn disappointment so long that good news makes you suspicious. Yet none of these states is the wearer. You are the one who has been wearing them. And this is why I do not want you to tear at the old garment tonight. Do not struggle to rip it away. Do not become angry because you still feel its weight. You have worn it for a long time. Of course it feels familiar. Simply discover what it is like to rest without fastening it so tightly around yourself. That is enough. Familiarity can be very convincing because it enters before thought. Suppose a friend tells you, "I have something important to tell you." Before they say another word, perhaps your stomach tightens. Why? Nothing has happened yet. The sentence itself was neutral, but familiarity moved quickly. The old state supplied an ending. Something bad, something uncomfortable, something you will have to endure. And because the feeling came before conscious reasoning, you call it intuition. Be careful. Not every familiar fear is intuition. Sometimes it is simply memory arriving early. You have seen a certain kind of scene before, and the mind has learned to complete it automatically. That completion may feel intelligent because it is fast, but speed does not make it true. A practiced pianist can strike a familiar sequence without deliberation. A practiced fear can do the same. It hears the first note and plays the whole old song. Tonight, you do not need to silence the instrument. Just notice when it begins playing from memory. Someone is late. The old melody begins. They do not care. A letter has not arrived. The old melody. I knew I would be disappointed. A financial matter appears uncertain. Again. There will never be enough. A person looks tired. They are withdrawing from me. An opportunity appears. I will probably lose it. The mind calls these conclusions realistic because they arrive so easily, but perhaps they arrive easily because they have been rehearsed. Ease of recall is not evidence of truth. It is evidence of repetition. This distinction matters, for if the old state were true because it felt familiar, then no man could ever become different. The child learning to read finds the letters unfamiliar. Later, reading becomes effortless. Was illiteracy his true nature because it came first? No. Familiarity changed. The man who moves to another city may feel lost for the first weeks. He does not know the streets. He turns the wrong way. He must think before every journey. Months later, he walks without effort. The streets have not become more real. They have become familiar. So when a new state feels strange, do not immediately conclude that it is false. It may simply be new. This is one of the great mistakes people make when they begin assuming another identity. They say, I am secure. And something within answers, no, you are not. They say, I am loved. And the old state says, that does not feel true. They say, I am capable. And the old self laughs, because inadequacy has had years of rehearsal. Then they conclude, I cannot believe the new state. Of course it does not yet feel as natural. You have spent perhaps 20 years rehearsing one and 20 minutes tasting the other. Do not demand equal familiarity immediately. Give the new state time to become ordinary. The first night in a new house can feel strange, even when the house is beautiful. You wake in darkness, and for a second do not know where you are. The unfamiliarity does not mean you are in the wrong house. It means the body has not yet learned the room. In the same way, you may enter a new state and feel psychologically disoriented. You say, this does not feel like me. Perhaps that sentence only means, this is not what I have practiced. Those are very different meanings. This is not me closes the door. This is not yet familiar, leaves it open. Use the second. Perhaps peace feels unfamiliar. Let it be unfamiliar. Perhaps being chosen feels unfamiliar. Let it be unfamiliar. Perhaps receiving without struggle feels unfamiliar. Let it be unfamiliar. Perhaps assuming that something could work out easily produces resistance. Fine. Do not turn resistance into revelation. It may only be the old garment, objecting because you have stopped buttoning it. You can allow strangeness without returning to the old state. This is how familiarity changes. Not in one enormous leap, through repeated permission. A little more time spent somewhere new. A little less time returning automatically to what was old. And because this is a night for sleep, we can do this gently. You do not need to persuade yourself that you are entirely transformed. You do not need to feel magnificent. Perhaps all you need is to experience 10 seconds in which the old identity is not being worn. 10 seconds. What would those 10 seconds feel like? Not rich, not adored, not victorious, simply free of the old garment. Imagine the man who has always said, everything is difficult for me. For 10 seconds, he does not say it. He lies quietly. Nothing is being demanded. Nothing is being interpreted. There is no evidence for difficulty, because there is no argument taking place. For 10 seconds, he is not the man who struggles. He is simply a man resting. That is important. There is a state beneath the story. Perhaps you have forgotten it, because the story has been speaking for so long. You are more than the history you repeat. You are more than the conclusions you drew from your history. You are more than the name you gave yourself because of certain events. The past may explain why a garment became familiar. It does not require you to wear it forever. Maybe you became cautious, because once you trusted someone and were hurt. That caution had a reason. Perhaps it protected you for a time. But a protection can become a prison when it is never removed. You may still be wearing armor in rooms where no battle is taking place. And because the armor has been there so long, the weight feels normal. Then someone says, relax. And relaxation feels dangerous. Someone offers affection, and affection feels suspicious. Someone offers help, and receiving feels uncomfortable. You call this instinct. Perhaps sometimes it is. But perhaps sometimes the body is merely loyal to yesterday. Do not condemn it. Thank the old protection for what it attempted to do. Then ask whether it is needed tonight. Right now, in this room, in this bed. Is the old armor needed here? Perhaps not. Then you do not have to destroy it. You can set it beside the bed, just for tonight. Tomorrow, if some practical situation requires discernment, you will have discernment. You are not becoming foolish. You are discovering that vigilance is not the same as wisdom. A man may be wise without anticipating danger every hour. A woman may be discerning without expecting betrayal. You can be financially responsible without living in dread of every expense. You can remember a disappointment without expecting it to be repeated. This is what it means to separate familiarity from truth. You stop saying, because I have felt this many times, it must be who I am. No, because you have felt it many times, it has become familiar. That is all you know. And what becomes familiar can change. Think of your handwriting. At first, as a child, every letter required attention. Now your hand moves almost without instruction. The movement became familiar through repetition. If you were forced to use the other hand, the writing would feel awkward. Would the awkwardness prove the hand incapable? No. It would prove that another pattern is more practiced. The same principle applies inwardly. If confidence feels awkward, it may need practice. If peace feels awkward, it may need practice. If thinking from fulfillment feels unnatural, perhaps you have spent years thinking from absence. The unfamiliar state is not false, because it requires conscious entry. Every familiar state was once entered for the first time. Perhaps you do not remember when. Perhaps the old identity formed gradually. A disappointment, then another, a conclusion, a story. A repeated story, a reaction, another reaction. Soon it became me. But anything assembled can be disassembled, not by violence, by no longer treating it as sacred truth. I always struggle, do you? Or have you become very skilled at noticing struggle and overlooking ease? People eventually leave. Do they all? Or has one wound become the lens through which departure is expected? Things never work easily for me. Never? Or does difficulty receive more attention because it agrees with the familiar identity? I have never been fortunate with money. Perhaps the past contains evidence of financial difficulty. Very well. But why must the past become an adjective attached to your name? You can say, I have experienced difficulty with money. That describes history. I am unfortunate with money. That creates identity. Notice the difference. One sentence has a door. The other builds a wall. Be precise with yourself. You do not need to deny history in order to stop turning history into character. Perhaps you failed at something. I failed. That is one statement. I am a failure. That is another. Perhaps someone rejected you. I was rejected. One event. I am rejected. A state. Perhaps you experienced abandonment. That person left. History. People leave me. Identity. The second sentence is usually more painful because it makes the past present. It carries yesterday into every new room. And once you expect the old pattern, you may begin behaving as though it is already happening. You withdraw first. You over-explain. You hold back. You cling. You hesitate. You do not take the opportunity. Then the familiar state seems to prove itself. Not because fate declared it, because you kept entering the world through its doorway. Again, do not blame yourself. See the mechanism and become free of the accusation. The goal is not to look backward and say, I caused everything. The goal is to look forward and say, I do not have to keep participating in the same interpretation. That is enough. Tonight, perhaps you can take one sentence you have said about yourself for years and hear it differently. I am just an anxious person. Instead, I have practiced anxiety. Feel the change. I am terrible with money. Instead, I have learned certain fearful reactions around money. I am unlucky in love. Instead, I have carried an expectation of disappointment into love. I am not confident. Instead, I have spent a great deal of time in states of self-doubt. The new sentences are less dramatic. That is good. They return movement to what had become fixed. A practiced state can be unpracticed. A learned reaction can cease being automatic. A familiar identity can become less familiar. And a new state can become home. This is what I want for you tonight. Not a sudden performance of another personality. A new home. And homes become familiar through living in them. You enter. You remain a little while. You learn the rooms. You discover where the light falls. You stop asking whether you are allowed to be there. Eventually you walk through the rooms without thinking. That is how a state becomes natural. At first you may consciously say, I am secure. Later, security no longer needs the sentence. At first you consciously imagine being loved. Later, you no longer interpret every silence as danger. At first you imagine yourself as successful. Later, opportunity simply feels like somewhere you belong. The verbal declaration disappears into identity. That is the movement. Do not be disappointed if tonight you are still aware that you are practicing. Practice precedes familiarity. You do not need to pretend otherwise. And sleep is an excellent place to practice, because the world is not constantly interrupting you with evidence. No one needs anything from you for these moments. No one is asking who you used to be. The room does not care about your history. The pillow has no opinion of your failures. The darkness does not know your old name for yourself. Think of that. For these few hours, you can be free from witnesses. Even your own inner witness can become quieter. You do not need to testify against yourself tonight. You do not need to present the case for why the old state is true. The court is closed. No more evidence. No more witnesses. No more closing argument. Let the case remain unfinished. Perhaps the old identity says, but you know me. I have been with you for years. Yes, it has. That does not make it eternal. An old neighbor may have lived beside you for 20 years. One day you move. The years remain true. The address changes. You do not have to erase the old house from the map. You simply stop living there. Let your old state become an old address, known, familiar, perhaps filled with memories, but not where you sleep tonight. Where would you rather rest? Not where would you like to perform? Where would you rest? In security? In being wanted? In sufficiency? In quiet confidence? In the feeling that life is not against you? Choose something simple. Do not build a grand palace of imagination. Choose one room. Perhaps the room is called, Things Can Work Out for Me. That is enough. Perhaps I do not need to expect loss. Enough. Perhaps I am allowed to feel at home in my own life. Enough. Perhaps good things do not have to feel suspicious. Stay there for a moment. It may feel unfamiliar. Let it. The unfamiliarity is not a warning. It is only evidence that you are no longer sitting in the same old chair. Perhaps the mind reaches for the familiar again. Of course, that is what practiced things do. Gently return. No frustration, no accusation. If a child learning a new route takes one wrong turn, you do not declare the journey impossible. You simply turn again. Do the same inwardly. The old sentence appears. Recognize it. That is familiar. Not, that is true. There is a profound difference. That is familiar. You can even feel tenderness toward it. There is the old thought. There is the old fear. There is the old expectation. It has traveled with me for a long time. But tonight, it does not need to sleep beside me. Let it remain at the edge. You do not have to fight it out of the room. Simply stop making space for it in the bed. Rest without it for a few minutes. See what happens. Perhaps nothing dramatic. Good. Perhaps the body becomes slightly less guarded. Perhaps the mind does not complete one old story. Perhaps you realize you have gone several minutes without thinking about the problem. Do not rush back to check on it. That moment of forgetting may be the beginning of another familiarity. The familiarity of peace. And peace may initially feel almost empty because anxiety was so busy. Let the emptiness remain. You do not need to fill it. A quiet room may feel strange after years beside a noisy street. Eventually the quiet becomes what you expect. So let the new state begin quietly. No fanfare, no proof, no tremendous emotion. A garment laid beside the bed. A body no longer carrying its weight. That is enough. You have worn the state so long that you mistook the garment for the wearer. But now you know. The garment can be removed. The wearer remains. And beneath every identity you have repeated, there is still the one who can choose again. Tonight, do not tear away the old self. Simply stop dressing yourself in it before sleep. Let the familiar become only familiar, not sacred, not permanent, not prophecy, not truth merely because it has accompanied you for years. You are allowed to become familiar with something else. A quieter expectation, a kinder identity, a life in which ease does not feel suspicious, a self that does not prepare for rejection before anyone speaks, a self that does not turn every uncertainty into danger. You do not need to become that self all at once. Rest there for a little while. Let the new garment lie lightly upon you. Perhaps by morning it will still feel new. That is all right. Wear it again tomorrow night, and again, until one day the state you once called impossible feels so natural that you can hardly remember why the old one ever seemed like the truth. If you wish to change what you call your frequency, do not begin by asking, "What vibration should I send out?" That language can make the whole matter feel distant from you, as though you were trying to operate some invisible machinery. I would rather bring you back to something much closer. Ask yourself, what is the inner tone of the person for whom my desired life is already normal? That is a very different question. Not what would they shout, not what would they repeat 100 times, not what tremendous emotion would overwhelm them. What is the tone, the atmosphere, the quiet psychological climate in which they live? For every state has one. The state of fear has a tone. The state of waiting has a tone. The state of being unwanted has a tone. The state of constantly trying to get enough has a tone. And the state of fulfillment has a tone too. Perhaps it is relief, perhaps security, perhaps belonging, perhaps quiet confidence, perhaps freedom, perhaps the simple feeling of being wanted, perhaps the feeling of being useful, perhaps the absence of financial threat, perhaps the knowing that things have a way of working out. Do not make this complicated. The inner tone is often much quieter than people imagine. A financially secure man does not leap with excitement every time he pays an account. He simply pays it. The event does not threaten his identity. He does not interpret every expense as evidence that ruin is approaching. He may be careful. He may be responsible. He may even dislike spending the money. But beneath the action there is not the same old sentence. What if there is never enough? That absence matters. A woman who feels deeply loved does not spend every hour celebrating the fact that she is loved. She does not wake each morning overwhelmed by emotion simply because affection exists in her life. Love has become ordinary. She can be occupied with breakfast, with a letter, with work, with some small irritation, with a journey. She does not need every moment to reassure her. She is not listening for abandonment in every silence. That is the tone. Naturalness. This is why I want you to stop measuring a new state by emotional intensity. You may think, if I were really in the state, I would feel tremendous joy. Perhaps, for a moment. But joy may be the first response to fulfillment, not the permanent atmosphere of it. When a long-awaited letter finally arrives with good news, perhaps you feel excitement. But a month later, you are not still dancing around the room because the letter came. Life has moved on. The fulfillment has become part of your normal world. That is where I want you to go. Beyond the first explosion of emotion, into the ordinary climate afterward. What is the inner tone of the person for whom your desired life is already normal? Suppose you desire more money. Do not begin by imagining yourself wildly excited over currency. Ask instead, how does the person who feels adequately supplied meet an ordinary Tuesday? How do they open the post? How do they think about next month? How do they respond when something unexpected costs more than anticipated? Perhaps they do not feel invincible. Perhaps they simply do not collapse. There is room between the expense and catastrophe. There is room to think. There is room to act. There is room to rest at night. That room is part of the state. Perhaps abundance for you is not luxury. Perhaps it is the end of constant inner contraction. Perhaps it is the feeling that life is not always about to take something from you. That may be the tone you are actually seeking. Then inhabit that, not extravagance, not performance, enoughness. Suppose you desire love. Ask, what is the inner tone of someone who knows love belongs in their life? Do they watch every word another person speaks? Do they reinterpret yesterday's conversation 10 times? Do they wonder whether one quiet evening means the relationship is ending? Perhaps not. Perhaps there is softness, room, trust, a willingness to let another person have a mood without making it a verdict upon your worth. That is a different atmosphere. The loved state is not always romance. Sometimes it is simply not feeling endangered by silence. Do you see how subtle this becomes? You may have been trying to produce the dramatic emotions of fulfillment while overlooking the much quieter signs of it. Security may feel like the absence of urgency. Belonging may feel like not wondering whether you should leave. Confidence may feel like not rehearsing every sentence before you speak. Freedom may feel like not asking permission inwardly. Being wanted may feel like no longer searching faces for proof. Being useful may feel like becoming absorbed in the work instead of constantly evaluating whether anyone appreciates you. Having enough may feel like allowing the mind to move on to another subject. These are tones. And tones are powerful because they color everything without needing to announce themselves. Think of a room in the late afternoon. The same furniture may remain, the same books, the same table, the same curtains, but if the light changes, the whole room feels different. Nothing has been removed. Nothing has been added. The atmosphere changes. A state can work like that. You may wake tomorrow in the same room. The same responsibilities may remain. The same people may still be where they were. Yet if the inner light has changed, the whole experience can begin to change in meaning. You are no longer meeting the room from the same tone. This is what I mean when I tell you that the state matters. The outer furniture of life may take time to rearrange, but the atmosphere can change before the furniture moves. Tonight, that is enough. You do not need a new house before you can taste belonging. You do not need a new account balance before you can taste the end of financial panic. You do not need someone to choose you before you can stop treating yourself as unchosen. You do not need applause before you can feel the quiet dignity of being useful. You do not need the entire road revealed before you can feel that you are no longer trapped. You can enter the tone first, and perhaps that is what you have been trying to do with too much effort. You thought you had to create a feeling, but a tone is not always created. Sometimes it is discovered by removing what does not belong. If the state were secure, what would no longer be happening inside you? Perhaps the repeated checking. Let it stop for a moment. If the state were love, what would no longer be happening? Perhaps the imaginary arguments. Let them become quiet. If the state were financial ease, what would no longer be happening? Perhaps the same frightened calculation. Leave the figures alone for the night. If the state were confidence, what would no longer be happening? Perhaps you would stop imagining the disapproval of people who are not even present. Let those imagined faces leave the room. The new tone may emerge not because you manufactured it, but because you stopped drowning it beneath the old noise. This is very important. Many people approach inner change as though they must produce something extraordinary. They say, I must feel powerful. I must feel ecstatic. I must feel absolutely certain. Then the inability to produce these feelings becomes another proof that they have not changed. But consider a man who has owned a watch for many years. Does he feel powerful because the watch belongs to him? No. He may not even think about it. Possession is often quiet. The very absence of excitement can be evidence of naturalness. If your desire were completely ordinary to you, perhaps you would not spend all day feeling anything special about it. Perhaps it would simply fit. Let fit become an important word tonight. Does the state fit? Not, can I force myself to believe it? Can you imagine allowing it to fit? A good coat, after some wearing, settles around the body. You stop noticing its structure. You simply wear it. In the same way, a state becomes natural when you no longer have to keep adjusting yourself to it. At first, perhaps the thought, I am secure, feels unfamiliar. You test it. You question it. You feel where it rubs against the old identity. Fine. Do not throw it away. Wear it lightly. Let it settle. Perhaps by tomorrow it still feels new. Wear it again. You are not performing security. You are becoming accustomed to its tone. This is how I would have you understand frequency. Not as something you send into the air, as something you become accustomed to being. The repeated inner climate of self. If fear is your accustomed climate, you call peace strange. If struggle is your accustomed climate, you call ease suspicious. If rejection is your accustomed climate, you call affection temporary. If lack is your accustomed climate, you call provision luck. You see, the old state even decides how the new evidence is interpreted. Someone loves you, and the rejected state says, it will not last. Money arrives, and the state of lack says, this was unusual. An opportunity appears, and the state of failure says, they will discover I do not belong. Good comes, but the old climate refuses to make it normal. This is why the real movement is inward. You do not merely want good things to visit, you want the state in which good things fit. That is deeper. Ask yourself now, what would fit naturally in the life I desire? If love were normal, kindness would fit. If prosperity were normal, receiving would fit. If success were normal, responsibility would fit. If freedom were normal, choice would fit. If belonging were normal, being seen would fit. Then ask, what would no longer fit? Perhaps panic would feel out of place. Perhaps begging would feel unnecessary. Perhaps constant self-explanation would feel strange. Perhaps apologizing for your existence would no longer fit. Perhaps assuming the worst would begin to feel like wearing an old coat that no longer sits properly on the shoulders. This is how the state changes. The new state begins to feel like home. The old one begins to feel like something remembered. You do not have to reach that point tonight, but you can begin. Perhaps choose one desired reality. Only one. Do not bring 10 desires into the room. Let one be enough. Maybe you want a secure relationship. Do not imagine the whole story. Ask, what is the tone of being securely loved? Perhaps ease. Then feel one moment of ease. Not the person, not the conversation, just the ease. What would it feel like to lie here without preparing for loss? Stay there. Perhaps you want financial security. Ask, what is the tone of having enough? Perhaps relief. Then do not imagine wealth in grand images. Feel the end of pressure. What if no calculation were required for the next few minutes? That may be enough. Perhaps you want success. Ask, what is the tone of someone who knows their work has value? Maybe quiet confidence, not boasting, not applause. The simple willingness to continue because you know you belong to the work. Feel that. Perhaps you want freedom from a situation. What is the tone of freedom? Maybe spaciousness, the feeling that there are alternatives, that tomorrow does not have only one possible shape. Rest in that. Do you see how much kinder this is than trying to force a tremendous emotional event before sleep? You do not need to lift yourself into some great height. You need to find the tone that belongs to the life you say you want. Then become familiar with it. Let it be subtle. If the old state was a brass band, the new state may first arrive as one quiet note. Do not dismiss the note because it is quiet. Listen. Relief, enough. Belonging, enough. Quiet confidence, enough. Freedom, enough. A sense that things can work out, enough. You do not need all of them. One is enough. And there is another reason this matters. A strong emotion is difficult to sustain. A tone can accompany ordinary life. You cannot spend every hour in ecstasy. You can spend many hours in quiet confidence. You cannot continually feel overwhelming gratitude. You can live with an underlying sense of being supported. You cannot remain emotionally excited about love every minute. You can live without expecting abandonment. The durable state is often quieter than the dramatic state. And because it is quieter, it can become part of your ordinary self. That is what we want. Not one magnificent moment you cannot maintain. A new normal. A new normal begins in tiny places. The way you hear someone's tone. The way you open a letter. The way you think about next week. The way you lie in bed before sleep. The way you respond inwardly when uncertainty appears. These are the places where the inner atmosphere reveals itself. Tomorrow you may notice the old tone returning. Do not become discouraged. You are learning to hear tone. Before, perhaps you heard only thoughts. Now you begin to notice the atmosphere beneath them. The thought may say, everything will be fine, while the atmosphere says, I am terrified. Do not argue with the fear. Notice it. What tone am I actually in? Then gently move, perhaps from terror to neutrality. That may be enough. People sometimes think every shift must be from fear to joy. No, there are many rooms between. From panic to I do not know yet. From I do not know yet to this may work out. From this may work out to things often work out for me. From things often work out for me, to no longer thinking about the matter. Naturalness grows by degrees. Let it. You do not need to leap, you need to stop making the old tone sacred. That is all. Perhaps tonight you cannot honestly feel abundant. Can you feel less threatened? Perhaps you cannot honestly feel completely loved. Can you feel less abandoned? Perhaps you cannot feel successful. Can you feel less judged? Perhaps you cannot feel entirely free. Can you feel that one more possibility exists than you saw this morning? That is movement. Respect small movement. The seed is small. The tree is not. And I do not mean this as a promise that one small feeling instantly produces a specific outer event. I mean that a state begins with consent. You consent to another atmosphere. You permit another tone. You stop insisting that the old one is the only honest response available. This is how inner change becomes real rather than theatrical. You do not lie to yourself. You widen what you allow yourself to feel. Perhaps you have been telling yourself that worry is responsible. Tonight, allow calm to be responsible. Perhaps you have thought vigilance protects you. Allow discernment without fear. Perhaps you thought struggle proves seriousness. Allow ease without guilt. Perhaps you thought being loved must feel intense. Allow love to become ordinary. This is the shift. Ordinary fulfillment. I want you to become interested in the ordinary signs of the state. A securely loved person sleeps. A financially secure person can think about something besides money. A confident person can make a mistake without turning the mistake into identity. A person who belongs can enter a room without internally asking, "Do they want me here?" A free person can say no, without spending 3 hours defending the decision in imagination. A useful person can work without constantly measuring applause. These are not spectacular scenes. That is why they are valuable. They reveal the psychological atmosphere. And tonight, because you are moving towards sleep, choose the quietest evidence. How would you lie here if the state were natural? Would the shoulders be doing the same thing? Would the stomach be preparing for tomorrow? Would you be rehearsing the same conversation? Would you be mentally opening the same envelope? Would you be imagining the same feared answer? Perhaps not. Then the tone of fulfillment may begin with not doing those things. Let the absence be enough. Nothing to solve for a few minutes. Nothing to prove. Nothing to obtain before sleep. Nothing to force into existence. The state is not waiting at the end of effort. You can taste it now. Quietly. Perhaps the entire shift tonight is this. You stop lying in bed as the one who is trying to become secure. And for a few minutes, you lie here as someone who has no immediate reason to defend against life. Feel the difference. Do not exaggerate it. A little softer. A little less watchful. A little less interested in proving what tomorrow will bring. That is enough. If you wish to call it frequency, then this is your new frequency, not a mystical signal. An inner tone, a way of being, a psychological atmosphere, a place to which consciousness can learn to return. And tonight, perhaps it returns to relief, perhaps to belonging, perhaps to enoughness, perhaps to quiet confidence, perhaps simply to the thought, "I do not have to expect the old thing again." Let that be your tone, not loud, not dramatic, just present. And as it becomes more familiar, you may discover something beautiful. The reality you wanted to force from the outside begins first to feel less foreign on the inside. It begins to fit. And what fits inwardly no longer feels like a distant dream. It begins to feel like somewhere you could actually live. You may speak a sentence very loudly within yourself and still live from another state entirely. This is why I do not measure consciousness by the words you happen to repeat at the surface. A man may say, "I am secure," again and again. He may say it in the morning. He may say it while walking to work. He may say it before opening the post. Then one small uncertainty appears. A payment is delayed. Someone changes an arrangement. A letter does not come. And before he can think, another sentence rises. Here we go again. That sentence may reveal more than the 100 declarations that came before it. Not because the declaration was useless. Not because he failed. But because the old state is still the place to which consciousness returns when effort stops. That is what I want you to observe. Your dominant state is the place to which consciousness returns when it is no longer performing, when you are no longer trying to feel spiritual, when you are no longer deliberately choosing the correct words, when no one is watching, when the exercise is over. Where do you return? That is the important question. Perhaps you say, I am loved. Then the telephone remains silent, and the mind immediately says, they are losing interest. Perhaps you say, I am successful. Then one person criticizes your work, and something within replies, I knew I was not good enough. Perhaps you say, life supports me. Then an unexpected expense appears, and the old conclusion rises. There is never enough. The first sentence may be conscious intention. The second may be habitual identity. Do not be discouraged by this. You have discovered where the work actually is. A man who does not know where he returns cannot deliberately choose another home. Now you can see it. This is why repetition alone is not the aim. Words are valuable when they lead you somewhere. If a sentence changes the state, it has served you. If a sentence remains only sound while the old state stays untouched beneath it, then do not merely increase the volume. Go deeper. Ask, what am I actually assuming? That is a more useful question. You may repeat, I am wealthy. But perhaps what you actually assume is, I am trying very hard to escape financial difficulty. Those two states are very different. One is possession, the other is pursuit. You may repeat, I am chosen, while actually assuming, I hope this person finally sees my value. Again, very different. One begins with worth, the other waits for confirmation. You may say, everything works out for me, while inwardly preparing yourself for the next disappointment. Then the statement and the state are moving in opposite directions. There is no need to shame yourself for this contradiction. Most people live in contradictions without knowing it. They desire one thing and expect another. They speak from one place and react from another. They consciously choose a sentence, then unconsciously return to an old conclusion. The contradiction becomes visible only when something interrupts the performance, and interruptions are useful. They reveal the state. Suppose tomorrow someone disappoints you. Instead of immediately deciding that the event proves your old story, notice what rises. Perhaps the first thought is, of course. That little phrase is revealing. Of course. It means the event feels consistent with an existing expectation. You were prepared for it. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere beneath deliberate thought, the old state had already made room for disappointment. Now you know. Do not say, I caused this. That is not necessary. Say, I see what still feels natural to me. That is wiser. The purpose of self-observation is not accusation, it is orientation. If you discover that your compass still points toward fear, you do not become angry with the compass. You adjust direction, and this is where night becomes particularly useful. During the day, you can maintain many ideas through effort. You are occupied. You are disciplined. You remind yourself. You correct your thoughts. But as you approach sleep, effort begins to loosen. The conscious mind becomes less interested in maintaining appearances. Then the deeper tendency often becomes more obvious. What do you think about when you are no longer trying to think correctly? What scene appears when the mind wanders? What question returns when the room becomes quiet? What future do you imagine accidentally? What do you expect when you stop trying to expect something better? That is where the dominant state often reveals itself. Perhaps every night you say, tomorrow will be different. Then, 10 minutes later, you are imagining the same difficulty continuing, not deliberately, automatically. There is the state. You do not have to fight it. You only have to stop confusing your automatic return with destiny. Habit is not destiny. A familiar return is still a return, and anything you return to can eventually be replaced by another place. This is why I would rather have you become familiar with one quiet state than repeat 50 impressive statements. Suppose your chosen state is security. Do not spend an hour saying, I am secure. Say it once if you wish. Then ask, what does security feel like when I am not talking about it? That is the real inquiry. Security may feel like not checking. It may feel like not anticipating loss. It may feel like not needing to solve next week before tonight ends. It may feel like letting the body lie still without keeping one part of the mind on guard. That is the state. The sentence should take you there. Once there, the sentence can disappear. You do not need to carry the ladder after you have climbed through the window. Words are ladders. States are rooms. Too many people polish the ladder and never enter the room. They ask, which words are strongest? Which affirmation is exact? How many times should I say it? These questions may be useful briefly, but do not let them distract you from the destination. Where does the phrase take you? If I am secure leaves you feeling as though you are trying desperately to become secure, choose another doorway. Perhaps nothing needs to threaten me tonight. Maybe that is easier. Or I can rest before everything is solved. Perhaps that opens the room. Or perhaps no words are needed. Perhaps security is felt when you stop rehearsing tomorrow. Use what moves you into the state. Do not worship the wording. The same is true with love. I am loved may be perfect for one person. For another, it may feel too far from the old identity. Then perhaps the doorway is, I do not have to earn affection tonight. Or, I can let myself be wanted. Or simply the imaginal experience of someone sitting beside you with complete ease. Again, the words are not magical in themselves. They are vehicles. The state is what matters. And when the state becomes dominant, you will notice something interesting. You stop needing to proclaim it so often. The man who genuinely feels secure does not constantly announce security. The woman who feels loved does not continually repeat that she is loved. The one who belongs does not spend every hour declaring belonging. The state speaks through the absence of the old questions. That is one of the clearest signs. You no longer ask as much. When? How? Do they? Will it? Am I? The interrogation becomes quieter. Not because you forced yourself to stop, because the state that needed the questions is losing its central place. This is why I tell you the loudest thought is not always the dominant one. The dominant state may be almost silent. It may reveal itself through the way you interpret an event before words even come. A man may say very little about fear, but organize his whole life around avoiding disappointment. Fear is dominant. Another may speak often about uncertainty, yet beneath the uncertainty carry a quiet confidence that things will be handled. Security may be dominant. Do not judge the state by surface noise alone. Listen beneath. What does the self assume? What does it expect? What feels normal? What conclusion seems to arrive without invitation? That is where you are standing. And if you do not like the place, you may move gently, not by shouting a louder sentence over the old one, by becoming more familiar with another place. Suppose your old state is financial strain. Every time money is mentioned, there is contraction. Every envelope seems to contain danger. Every future expense feels larger than it is. Then saying, I am rich, may produce no movement at all. Try something more honest and more useful. Imagine the state in which money is no longer the first threat you see in every event. What would that feel like? Perhaps you open an envelope calmly. Perhaps you write a check and then think about something else. Perhaps someone mentions a future expense and you do not immediately construct a disaster. The tone is different. Rest there. That may do more to change the dominant state than an hour of loud affirmation. Or suppose the old state is rejection. You can say, I am chosen all day, but when someone is quiet, the body contracts and the mind begins to chase. Again, observe. Do not condemn. Then ask, what would I be doing inwardly if silence did not mean rejection to me? Perhaps nothing. That is beautiful. Nothing. No story. No investigation. No imaginary conversation. Just silence. You are discovering the state beneath the words. And this is particularly valuable at night because sleep strips away performance. You cannot maintain deliberate mental effort forever. Eventually, you drift. And when you drift, the old state may try to resume its familiar place. This is where the practice becomes very gentle. You do not need to remain vigilant. You do not need to catch every thought. You only need one simple place to return. Perhaps relief, perhaps enoughness, perhaps belonging. Perhaps the feeling that tomorrow does not have to repeat today. Choose one. Then when the mind wanders, you do not correct every image, you return to the tone. This is very different from mental policing. Mental policing keeps you awake. It says, that was a negative thought. Fix it. Then another appears. Fix that too. Soon you are lying in bed conducting an inspection of consciousness. That is not rest. Let the mind wander. If an old thought becomes interesting enough to pull you back into the old state, notice and return. Not to the perfect sentence, to the tone. Maybe the tone is simply, all is not decided by what I see tonight. Rest there. Maybe, I can let this be easier. Rest there. Maybe no language, a softened face, a body no longer bracing, a sense that you are not standing before judgment. That is enough. You are training return. And return matters more than force. For the old dominant state became dominant by return. You return to it when disappointed. You return to it when uncertain. You return to it when alone. You return to it when tired. You return to it when something good happened, and you wondered how long it would last. That is how it became home. So do not expect to dethrone it through one loud declaration. Build another home. Return there. Again, gently. Every return makes the new state more familiar. This is why I would never tell you that one moment of doubt destroys everything. That would make fear even more powerful. Doubt may appear. What matters is whether you make it residence. You can feel doubt and return. You can feel sadness and return. You can react poorly and return. You can wake in fear and return. The new state becomes dominant, not because no other state ever appears, but because it becomes the place you increasingly choose to come back to. That is mastery without violence. You are not exterminating thoughts. You are changing home. Perhaps this changes how you understand affirmation. An affirmation is not a spell. It is a directional statement. I am secure. Where does that point? If it points you toward tension because you feel you must prove it, then soften. Perhaps, I am learning the feeling of security. That may feel more accessible. But even then, do not stay in the sentence. Feel the place. And once you feel the place, perhaps another sentence becomes natural. This is easier. Or, I can rest. Or simply, enough. Sometimes the smallest word carries the largest state. Do not become obsessed with perfect language. The state is larger than the wording. Consider a man who receives good news after months of waiting. Perhaps he says nothing at all. He places the letter down. He sits. He exhales. There is the state. No affirmation, no declaration, no speech. Just completion. Learn from that. The deepest states are often quiet because they do not need to persuade anyone, including you. This is where we are going. From declaration to naturalness. From repetition to occupancy. From trying to sound like the fulfilled person to actually resting as that person. And because you are listening while preparing for sleep, you may begin practicing now. Do not ask yourself, what should I say next? Ask, where do I return when I stop trying? Perhaps you already know. Maybe worry. Maybe waiting. Maybe self-doubt. Maybe the need to control tomorrow. Good. You have seen the old home. Now ask, where would I rather return? Choose something simple. Relief, security, belonging, quiet confidence, enoughness, a sense that life is not against you. Let that become the new return, perhaps only for 20 seconds. Then the mind wanders. Return again. No frustration. Perhaps 5 seconds. Return. Do not count. Do not turn this into work. You are simply teaching consciousness another route, like walking through a field. The first path is worn because many feet have crossed it. Another path may be faint. Each time you walk it, the grass bends a little more. Eventually it becomes easier to see. You need not destroy the old path. Use the new one. That is all. The old state may remain available for some time. You simply stop choosing it every time. And one night, perhaps you will notice something strange. The old thought appears and feels less convincing. The old fear speaks and sounds almost theatrical. The old conclusion arrives and you think, I do not have to believe that. That moment is significant, not because the old state disappeared. because you are no longer automatically inside it. There is space, and space is freedom. Your loudest thought may still be fear for a moment, but perhaps beneath it, another state has begun becoming more natural. You know you can return. That knowing changes everything. You no longer panic because fear appeared. You no longer think doubt is proof. You no longer measure yourself by one passing reaction. You have somewhere else to go. And tonight, I want that place to be simple enough that you can find it half asleep. Not a complicated visualization, not a long speech, a tone, a feeling, an atmosphere. Perhaps I am safe enough to rest. Perhaps I belong in the life I desire. Perhaps I do not need to chase. Perhaps what I need can meet me. Perhaps no words at all. Just the body lying differently, the face softer, the hands quiet, the mind no longer leaning toward tomorrow. Let that be the return. If another thought comes, fine, let it come. You do not need to silence the whole mind before sleep. You are only changing the place to which you return, again and again, gently, until returning requires less effort, until the new state begins to feel more familiar than the old one, until one day you notice that the first spontaneous thought after uncertainty is no longer, here we go again. Perhaps it becomes, we will see. Then later, this can be handled. Then perhaps no anxious sentence comes at all. That is how a dominant state changes, quietly, through repeated return, not by the loudest declaration, by the place consciousness increasingly recognizes as home. So tonight, do not ask whether you have said enough. Do not ask whether the affirmation was powerful enough. Do not count repetitions. Do not strain to maintain a perfect feeling. Simply notice where you return, and when you remember, return somewhere else, a little softer, a little freer, a little more secure. That is enough. Your dominant state is not carved into you. It is practiced. And what has been practiced in one direction can be practiced in another. Let sleep become part of that new practice. Let the old home grow quieter behind you. Let the new one become easier to enter. You do not need to announce your arrival. You only need to keep returning. I do not ask you tonight to pretend to be happy. I do not ask you to force a smile over something that still troubles you. I do not ask you to call sorrow joy, or uncertainty certainty, or difficulty ease, simply because you think you are supposed to maintain some elevated state. That kind of performance exhausts people. They hear that consciousness matters, and then they become frightened of every honest emotion. They feel sad, and immediately think, I must correct this. They feel worried and say, I am ruining everything. They feel disappointment, and then become disappointed in themselves for being disappointed. Now there are two burdens instead of one. I would have you put down both. You are allowed to have a human feeling. The question is not whether sadness ever visits you. The question is whether you build your identity there. The question is not whether fear arises. The question is whether fear becomes the place from which you define tomorrow. You do not need to be cheerful every minute in order to occupy a new state. Sometimes the deepest change is much quieter. You stop waiting. That is all. You stop waiting for permission to feel differently. You stop waiting for someone to choose you before you allow yourself to feel chosen. You stop waiting for the bank balance to change before you permit yourself 1 hour without financial fear. You stop waiting for the letter before you allow your mind to leave the postbox. You stop waiting for another person to behave perfectly before you let yourself feel secure. You stop waiting for circumstances to certify your new identity. This is far more important than pretending to be happy. Ask yourself now, if it were already done, what would I no longer be waiting for? Do not answer too quickly. If it were already done, what would you no longer be waiting for? Perhaps you would no longer be waiting for the telephone to ring. Perhaps you would no longer be listening for footsteps. Perhaps you would no longer be wondering whether the employer had made a decision. Perhaps you would no longer be rehearsing what you would say if someone finally asked you to stay. Perhaps you would no longer be wondering how many days remained before something changed. Perhaps you would no longer be checking whether the thing was working. That is where the fulfilled state may begin to reveal itself, not as ecstasy, as the end of waiting. Think of how strange waiting is. It seems passive, but inwardly it is very active. The waiting person is always leaning forward psychologically. The body may be sitting still, but consciousness is stretched toward a future event. When? Will it? Has it? Maybe tomorrow. Perhaps next week. Perhaps after this happens. The waiting state lives somewhere ahead of itself. It cannot fully inhabit the present, because the present is treated only as a corridor, leading to another room. And if you remain in that corridor long enough, waiting itself becomes familiar. Then even when something good begins to happen, you find another thing to wait for. You wanted the invitation. It arrives. Now you wait for the meeting. The meeting goes well. Now you wait for the decision. The decision is favorable. Now you wait to see whether it lasts. The relationship begins. Now you wait for reassurance. Reassurance comes. Now you wait to see whether the person changes. You see, a waiting identity can transform every arrival into another departure point. Nothing is ever allowed to become present. This is why I ask you to stop defining yourself as the one who is trying to manifest something. That identity sounds hopeful, but examine it carefully. The one who is trying to manifest love. Where is love? Ahead. The one who is trying to manifest money. Where is supply? Ahead. The one who is trying to become successful. Where is success? Ahead. The one who is working on feeling secure. Where is security? Still ahead. The identity of trying to get there keeps there away by definition. You are always approaching, always preparing, always becoming ready, always nearly there. Tonight, let that identity rest. You do not need to be the person who is manifesting. You can simply be. That may feel almost too simple, but the fulfilled state is often simple. A man who is married does not usually think of himself all day as the man manifesting marriage. A woman who lives in her own home does not call herself the woman trying to manifest a residence. A man doing satisfying work does not spend every hour as the one manifesting employment. The desired condition has passed from project into life. That is what you want inwardly, not another project. Life. And life is not constantly announcing itself. It is being lived. Suppose you desire financial security. The waiting version of you says, when enough money arrives, then I will relax. Notice the agreement. Relaxation has been postponed. Peace must wait outside until money produces the proper certificate. Now suppose you reverse the order. You do not pretend the account contains what it does not contain. You simply stop making tension a requirement of honesty. You can attend to the account tomorrow. Tonight, what if you are no longer waiting for a number before the body is permitted to rest? That is a profound change. You are not spending imaginary money. You are not making foolish decisions. You are simply refusing to make anxiety your proof of financial responsibility. Perhaps the new state is not I feel rich. Perhaps it is I no longer have to wait for perfect circumstances before I can feel supported. That is more natural. Suppose you desire love. Perhaps there is someone specific whose answer matters to you. You do not need to pretend indifference. You may care deeply. But ask, if love were already settled in me, what would I stop waiting for? Perhaps I would stop waiting for one sentence to tell me who I am. Perhaps I would stop waiting for every silence to end before I could breathe. Perhaps I would stop waiting for another person's mood to become favorable before I felt secure in myself. This does not mean you stop desiring harmony. It means harmony is no longer asked to create your identity from nothing. You bring an identity to harmony, the one who feels loved, the one who belongs, the one who does not need to stand at the edge of every relationship with a suitcase packed in case affection disappears. Feel the difference. The waiting person says, tell me I can stay. The secure person is already seated, not arrogantly, naturally. Perhaps the external relationship still needs time to reflect that inner movement. Fine. But inwardly, you stop living in the railway station. You have arrived somewhere. This is why the shift from when will it happen to it is no longer a question in me is so powerful. Notice that I did not say you must know the date. You do not. I did not say you must know the means. You do not. I did not even say that the mind will never ask when, again. It may, but the question no longer has to be the organizing principle of your state. When will it happen? A thought, not a home. The thought appears, you notice. Then perhaps another inner response comes. It is no longer a question I need to live inside. That is enough. You do not have to answer when. You can outgrow the question. There are questions that matter only before fulfillment. A man waiting for employment asks, will they take me? A man established in work asks, what must I do today? A woman longing for a home asks, will I ever find the right place? A woman living there asks, where did I put the keys? The questions themselves reveal state. Listen to your questions. They may tell you more than your declarations. Do they love me? Waiting, will I have enough? Waiting, will this finally work? Waiting, am I doing this correctly? Waiting, how soon? Waiting, what if nothing changes? Waiting and fear join together. Do not punish yourself when these questions arise. Simply recognize their address. They come from the waiting room. You do not need to answer every question shouted from the waiting room. You can leave the room. Perhaps the door is not dramatic. Perhaps the exit is one sentence. I do not need to know tonight. Or, this is no longer the question I choose to sleep with. Then you lie down differently. You see, I am not trying to raise your emotion. I am trying to remove unnecessary psychological distance. The waiting state says, my life is there, and I am here. The fulfilled state says, this belongs to me now, as an inner fact. That does not always produce excitement. Sometimes it produces less thought. That is why people can overlook real inward change. They expect fireworks. Instead, they become bored with the question. A subject that once occupied the whole evening loses its fascination. They stop rehearsing. They forget to check. They notice hours have passed without thinking of the problem. And then they worry. Have I given up? Perhaps not. Perhaps you have stopped feeding waiting. Do not confuse peace with indifference. Indifference says, I do not care. Peace says, I care. But I do not need to suffer every minute while I care. There is a great difference. You may desire something deeply and still eat supper. You may love someone deeply and still sleep. You may want a new life and still enjoy an ordinary afternoon. The desire does not become weaker because you stop using anxiety to prove its importance. This is one of the habits I want you to release. Many people think the intensity of their worry measures the sincerity of their desire. I must really want this because I cannot stop thinking about it. Not necessarily. You may simply have practiced waiting. The fulfilled person often thinks less about the thing, not more. Why? Because possession frees attention. When you cannot find your keys, you think about the keys. Once they are in your pocket, you think about where you are going. Fulfillment returns consciousness to life. So perhaps the new state begins when you stop trying to keep the desire continuously in front of you. Let it belong. Then look elsewhere. You do not need to stare at what is yours inwardly. This is especially useful before sleep. If you have spent the whole day thinking about the desired outcome, do not make the night another shift at the same factory. The mind is tired. Let the desire become quiet. Perhaps tonight you do not visualize the thing itself. Perhaps you visualize what happens when you are no longer waiting. You turn off the lamp without checking the clock. You place a book beside the bed. You think about something ordinary. You hear yourself say, I can deal with tomorrow, tomorrow. That may imply more fulfillment than a grand image. The person who is no longer waiting has room for ordinary life. Room is the feeling. And perhaps that is your shift tonight. Not from sadness to joy, from crowded to spacious, not from fear to ecstasy, from vigilance to permission, not from lack to grand abundance, from I must get to I do not need to chase tonight, not from uncertainty to absolute knowledge, from I must know to I can rest without knowing. These are honest shifts. They do not require theater. You can feel sad and still stop waiting. You can miss someone and still stop measuring your worth by their return. You can be uncertain about money and still stop mentally impoverishing yourself every hour. You can be disappointed and still refuse to make disappointment your address. This is mature assumption. It does not require you to become emotionally artificial. It asks you to change the deeper relationship to the state. Suppose you receive bad news tomorrow. You may feel disappointment. That is human. But the old self says, this proves I am still waiting. The new state may say, this is one event. I do not have to become the one whose whole life is postponed. You feel the emotion. You do not build a house around it. This is why I tell you that a new state can coexist with temporary emotion. A securely loved person can feel sad. A prosperous person can be concerned about an expense. A confident person can feel nervous before an important conversation. A fulfilled person can have an unpleasant day. States are larger than passing emotions. Do not reduce them to mood. Your frequency, if you use that word, is not the emotion you happen to feel for 10 minutes. It is the inner position you repeatedly come home to. So if sadness visits, let it visit. But where do you return? If uncertainty visits, let it visit. Where do you return? If disappointment visits, let it visit. Where do you return? Perhaps you return to, I am still the one for whom life can open. Perhaps I am still worthy. Perhaps I am still supported. Perhaps simply, this moment does not decide me. That is enough. You are no longer waiting for perfect emotion before you grant yourself a new identity. That is another form of waiting people seldom notice. I will know I have changed when I never feel fear. Then change remains ahead. I will know I am secure when I never worry. Ahead. I will know I am loved when I never doubt. Ahead. No. You can be the new person while old feelings are still learning that they no longer run the house. Let them take time. You do not need to evict every emotion tonight. Just stop giving them the keys. You are the occupant. This is your consciousness. You choose the dominant state. And perhaps the dominant state tonight is simply one in which nothing is demanded before rest. Feel how radical that is for the waiting mind. Nothing demanded. No message. No answer. No money. No decision. No proof. No sign. No perfect feeling. Nothing required before you are allowed to rest as someone different. Then the future loses some of its grip. You stop leaning forward. Come back into the bed. Come back into the room. The desired life does not have to be mentally located 6 months from here. Let its tone come here. Now. What tone? Perhaps enoughness. Perhaps being received. Perhaps settledness. Perhaps the simple absence of waiting. If it were already done, what would you no longer be waiting for? Let one answer appear. Maybe I would stop waiting for them to reassure me. Then for tonight, stop. Maybe I would stop waiting for a financial miracle before I could breathe. Then breathe without making it a miracle. Maybe I would stop waiting for someone to tell me I am good enough. Then let the imaginary tribunal dissolve. Maybe I would stop waiting to feel ready. Then rest as someone who does not need another preparation. You do not have to take a dramatic action. The deepest movement may be invisible. You stop postponing yourself. That is the phrase. Stop postponing yourself. You have perhaps postponed peace, postponed confidence, postponed love, postponed dignity, postponed rest. You kept saying, after the money, after the decision, after the apology, after the opportunity, after the move, after the proof, but the state exists first in consciousness. If you always wait for after, you will continue meeting life as the one who is before. Tonight, enter after inwardly, not by pretending the outer event happened, by experiencing the inner consequence that would follow it. What would end? Waiting. What would soften? Urgency. What would lose importance? Proof. What question would disappear? When? There. Stay there. Perhaps only for a few breaths. No need to celebrate. Fulfillment does not need a trumpet. It may sound like silence, a beautiful silence in which there is no question to answer. Imagine how much energy has gone into asking when. Days, months, perhaps years. Tonight, the question does not need another hearing. Let it remain unanswered. An unanswered when cannot hurt you if you stop requiring an answer before you live. You are not abandoning desire. You are withdrawing your life from postponement. That is the shift. And perhaps tomorrow the question returns. Fine. You recognize it. There is the old waiting identity. You do not need to fight it. Perhaps you smile inwardly and say, I know that room. Then do not enter. You have another place now. The place where the matter does not define your right to peace. The place where identity comes before evidence. The place where you can want without begging, care without clinging, hope without postponing yourself, act without desperation, rest without proof. That is a beautiful state, and it does not require constant happiness. It may contain tears, it may contain uncertainty, it may contain ordinary human fatigue, but beneath those things there is a quiet difference. You are no longer standing at the gate of your own life waiting to be admitted. You have entered inwardly. That is enough. So tonight, do not ask yourself whether you feel happy enough. Do not measure vibration by mood. Do not insist upon excitement. Ask something simpler. Am I still waiting for the outer world to give me permission to become who I choose to be? If the answer is yes, do not condemn yourself. Simply take back the permission. You can feel secure before every question is answered. You can feel worthy before everyone agrees. You can feel belonging before every door opens. You can feel supplied before you know every future source. You can feel settled before the entire road is visible, not perfectly. Enough to rest. That is all I ask tonight. Enough to rest. Let the waiting person become tired now. They have watched the clock long enough. They have checked enough. They have wondered enough. They have stood at the window long enough. Let them sit down. Let them discover that life continues even when they stop watching for it. Perhaps the thing you want does not need your constant observation. Perhaps the future can approach without being stared at. Perhaps you can close your eyes. Perhaps that itself is the first evidence that something inside has shifted. You are not waiting in the same way. You are not leaning toward tomorrow. You are here. And the state you desire can begin here, quietly, without performance, without forced happiness, without pretending. Simply as the one for whom the question, when will it happen, is beginning to lose its authority. And perhaps, before sleep comes, the question disappears altogether, not answered, outgrown. It is no longer a question in me. Let that be enough. As the night becomes quieter, I want you to notice something very simple. Every state has a posture. Every state has a way of sitting in the body. Every state has a way of occupying the face, the hands, the shoulders, the breath. You already know this, even if you have never put it into words. The worried man does not merely think worried thoughts. His jaw participates. His forehead participates. His hands participate. His breathing participates. The person expecting bad news listens differently. The person waiting to be rejected carries the chest differently. The person fearing money thinks with the whole body. The person who believes something must go wrong does not merely hold the belief in some invisible corner of the mind. The state has learned the body. And because the body has learned the state, sometimes the body continues rehearsing it even after the thoughts become quieter. This is why tonight I do not want you only to think differently. I want you to ask something much gentler. How would this body lie here if there were nothing left to defend against tonight? Do not turn that into an exercise you must perform correctly. You do not need perfect relaxation. You do not need to control the breath. You do not need to force the muscles to soften. You are not trying to pass some examination of stillness. You are simply becoming curious. How would this body rest if the matter were already settled? That question is enough. Perhaps the answer begins in the jaw. You may not even realize how much of the day is still being held there. Words you did not say, arguments you rehearsed, decisions you are trying to make, things you wish you had answered differently. The jaw may still be carrying conversations that ended hours ago. Ask it nothing. Simply notice. If the matter were no longer threatening, would you need to hold the mouth so tightly? Perhaps not. Then allow a little space. Not because a relaxed jaw manifests anything, but because the body of the fulfilled state has less to defend. That is all. The body can become an expression of assumption, not a trick, not a signal sent outward, an expression. Suppose you have been worried about money. All day the mind has been counting, adding, subtracting, predicting, remembering due dates, anticipating what may be needed next. Then you lie down, but the calculation continues. The body is horizontal. The accountant within is still standing at the desk. Perhaps the stomach is tight. Perhaps the breath is shallow. Perhaps the fingers are moving slightly under the blanket, as though still turning pages. You may not notice how completely the financial state has entered the body. So ask, if I knew there was enough for what truly belongs to me, how would this body rest? Not how would a millionaire rest? That may be too theatrical. How would you rest if you did not feel hunted by the next expense? Maybe the abdomen would not need to remain contracted. Maybe the hands could stop holding invisible figures. Maybe the mind could allow one unfinished calculation to remain unfinished until morning. That is already another state. Perhaps you cannot yet feel abundance. Fine. Can the body feel less threatened? That is enough. Perhaps you cannot yet feel complete security. Can the stomach stop preparing for disaster for 5 minutes? Enough. This is how the state enters the flesh quietly, not through force, through permission. Suppose the concern is love. Perhaps you have been waiting for someone to speak, waiting for a letter, waiting for a visit, waiting for reassurance. The whole day, the body has been listening. A sound outside, a movement in the hall, the telephone, footsteps, a knock. The waiting state makes the body alert to interruption. Even in bed, some part of you may still be listening, not consciously. But the body has not fully accepted that waiting is over for the night. Then ask, how would this body lie here if I were not waiting for anyone to prove my worth? Feel the difference. Perhaps the chest would not be preparing for disappointment. Perhaps the throat would not be holding the next question. Perhaps the ears could stop listening for evidence. Perhaps the face would not be arranged around uncertainty. You do not need to tell yourself, I am loved, if that feels too deliberate. Perhaps the body can first practice not waiting. Let the bed hold your weight. Let the room be quiet without making quietness mean absence. Silence does not have to mean rejection. Tonight, silence can mean nothing. Just silence. That is a different state. A person who feels secure can hear quiet and remain quiet. The old state hears quiet and invents a story. Let the body learn the new meaning. Nothing is happening right now, and nothing has to happen. That sentence alone can soften a great deal. Nothing has to happen right now. No answer must come. No person must move. No money must arrive. No door must open. No decision must be made. No proof must appear. This moment is not asking you for evidence. So why should the body behave as though an emergency is taking place? Maybe it has forgotten that it can stand down. Let it remember, not by commanding, by showing it another possibility. How would this body lie here if there were nothing left to defend against tonight? Perhaps the shoulders would become heavier, not forced downward, just less prepared to carry tomorrow. The shoulders often reveal responsibility. A man who believes everything depends upon him carries invisible weight. He may think, if I do not solve this, no one will. If I do not stay alert, something will go wrong. If I stop thinking, I will lose control. Then the shoulders remain ready, ready to lift, ready to endure, ready to brace. But suppose the matter was settled, would the shoulders still need to hold the world? No. Then let the world fall away from them for a little while. You can pick up what is truly yours tomorrow. Tonight, you are not required to carry the whole future. Let the shoulders be only shoulders, not shelves, not armor, not proof of responsibility. Only shoulders resting against the bed. The forehead may be carrying another part of the state. The mind tries to solve through the face. You frown at tomorrow. You narrow the eyes at uncertainty. You think harder because you believe effort itself will produce the answer. But some answers do not come through strain. And even when practical thought is useful, this hour is not improved by another round of mental pressure. So notice the forehead. If the matter were already handled, would you need to tighten it this way? Perhaps not. Let the skin smooth only as much as it wishes. Again, not as a relaxation technique, as a consequence. You are assuming there is less to defend against. The body may follow. Maybe slowly. That is fine. You do not need instant obedience from the body. It has carried old states faithfully. Be kind to it. It may not believe the new atmosphere immediately. Let it discover. The same is true of the hands. Hands reveal much. The worried person grips. The waiting person fiddles. The uncertain person holds. The one who fears losing something may sleep with the hands partially closed. The body is still saying, I must keep hold of this. What are you holding tonight? A person, a plan, an answer, an image of how something must happen, a grievance, a fear, a number? Perhaps the hands can teach you something. Open them slightly, not dramatically. Just enough to feel that you are not physically holding the future. Let the fingers rest. You do not need to keep the desired life from escaping through the night. What belongs to your state does not require clenched hands. Let the hands become evidence of not chasing. This is important. The new state may first appear as the absence of pursuit. No reaching, no gripping, no trying to pull tomorrow toward you. The hands are here. The future is there. You are not dragging it across the room. Let it come in its own time. Perhaps the breath reveals even more. Do not control it. Please do not turn breathing into another task. You already know how to breathe. But notice the quality. The frightened state often breathes as though the next moment might contain trouble. Short, interrupted, measured. The fulfilled state may not breathe better. It simply has less to prepare for. So perhaps the breath lengthens naturally when the body begins to believe there is no immediate threat. Let that happen if it happens. If not, leave it alone. The breath is not the point. The state is the point. You are not using the breath to manufacture reality. You are allowing the breath to reflect a different inner assumption. That distinction matters. Otherwise, you will begin asking, am I breathing correctly? And once again, the old state of performance returns. No, nothing correct is required. You are lying here as a human being, not as an instrument to be tuned with perfect precision. The body can be imperfectly tired. The mind can be imperfectly quiet. The breath can be uneven. The state can still begin to change. This is why I want you to move away from the idea that manifestation requires emotional perfection. It does not. If you are sad, the body may still feel heavy. Fine. If you are tired, you may feel restless. Fine. If you are uncertain, the breath may not immediately settle. Fine. Can you still ask, how would this body lie here if there were nothing left to defend against tonight? Maybe the answer is not completely relaxed. Maybe the answer is less defended. That is enough. Less defended. Perhaps 1% less. Do not underestimate 1%. A small change in posture may reveal a large change in permission. The old state says, remain ready. The new state says, you may rest. That is the movement. You may rest, not because all circumstances are solved, because you do not need to solve them with your muscles. The body does not know tomorrow's answer. It cannot write the letter. It cannot alter another person's mind. It cannot move money by clenching the stomach. It cannot create safety by tightening the jaw. Let the body stop performing jobs it was never given. That is deeply practical. Suppose someone criticized you today. The words remain. You may still feel them in the chest. There is a strange thing people do with criticism. They keep the body ready to hear it again. The outer voice has stopped, but inwardly the posture remains defensive. The chin changes. The shoulders stiffen. The breath becomes narrower. You are still standing before the person even though you are alone. Tonight, let the body leave the room. You may remember the words without physically standing there again. The event is over. The body can know that before the mind has completely forgiven it. This is another kind of revision, not changing the memory yet, changing the posture from which the memory is held. The old posture says, I am still under attack. The new posture says, that moment is not happening now. That is a powerful shift, not mystical, immediate. This moment is not that moment. Let the body know where it is. Here, in bed, in a quiet room, not in yesterday's conversation, not in tomorrow's meeting. Here, the rejected self often lives physically in the future. It is already bracing for the next no. The financially afraid self lives physically in the next month. The ashamed self lives physically in the past. The waiting self lives physically in the next message, the next letter, the next answer. Bring the body back to the present, not as a mindfulness exercise, but because fulfillment does not require you to inhabit every tense at once. Tonight is enough. This mattress, this pillow, this breath, this moment. No future answer is physically present here. No past voice is physically present here. The body can stop responding to ghosts. This may be one of the most compassionate things you do for yourself tonight. You let the body stop fighting scenes that are not in the room. The person who once frightened you is not in the bed. The bill is not pressing its hands against your chest. The employer is not standing over the pillow. The unanswered letter is not inside your lungs. The future is not sitting upon your shoulders. These are states. Let them become less embodied. And as the old state loosens from the body, perhaps another state begins to feel possible. Not through affirmation, through posture. What is the posture of belonging? Maybe the body takes up a little more space, not aggressively, naturally. What is the posture of security? Maybe the muscles stop apologizing for resting. What is the posture of being wanted? Maybe the chest is no longer withdrawing in anticipation. What is the posture of having enough? Maybe the stomach is not preparing for lack. What is the posture of confidence? Maybe the face is not rehearsing someone else's judgment. These are subtle things. Do not exaggerate them. You are not acting. If you push the chest out and hold the chin high to be confident, you have turned the state into theater. Let it be more natural. Confidence may look like the absence of collapse. Security may look like the absence of bracing. Love may look like the absence of waiting. Abundance may look like the absence of counting for one peaceful moment. That is enough. The body of the fulfilled state is often less dramatic than the body of desire. Desire reaches. Fulfillment receives. Desire leans. Fulfillment settles. Desire listens for evidence. Fulfillment can afford not to listen. Desire tightens around possibility. Fulfillment has room. You may begin to understand why sleep is such a beautiful doorway. Sleep asks the body to surrender effort naturally. You do not have to manufacture surrender. If you stay with the night long enough, the body begins giving up its positions. The hand stops holding. The jaw loosens. The breath changes. The shoulders sink. The eyes become less interested in the room. The body is already moving toward a condition in which control becomes less important. Let your assumption accompany that movement. Do not fight against sleep in order to maintain the state. Let sleep help you. Perhaps the old self wants to stay awake because it believes vigilance is necessary. But the new state can sleep. This is important. The person who trusts can sleep. The person who has arrived can sleep. The person who no longer expects immediate danger can sleep. The person who is no longer waiting can sleep. Then perhaps sleep itself becomes part of the assumed state. Not because sleep has magical power. Because the body of the fulfilled state has permission to stop guarding the night. Ask again. How would this body lie here if there were nothing left to defend against tonight? Perhaps now the answer feels slightly different. The shoulders might be heavier, the jaw less involved, the hands quieter, the stomach less contracted, the forehead less occupied, the breath less watched. Let each part become less responsible. You do not need the whole body to change at once. Maybe only the hands. Good. Maybe only the jaw. Good. Maybe nothing changes physically, but the question changes your relationship to the tension. Also good. You are no longer saying, this tension proves I am afraid. You are saying, this body has practiced defense. Tonight it may practice rest. That is kinder. And kindness makes change easier than force. There is another thing I want you to notice. Sometimes people become attached to tension because they think tension proves they care. A mother worries for a child and feels guilty when she relaxes. A man worries about money and thinks rest is irresponsible. A woman worries about a relationship and believes that if she stops thinking about it, she is giving up. But tension is not devotion. Worry is not evidence of love. Sleeplessness is not evidence of responsibility. You may care and still rest. You may be responsible and still rest. You may deeply desire a change and still let the body stop struggling for the night. This is part of the new state. You are not indifferent. You are no longer using tension as proof that something matters. The thing can matter without living in your shoulders. The person can matter without living in your stomach. The money can matter without living in your jaw. Tomorrow can matter without occupying tonight. Let each thing return to its proper place. Tomorrow belongs to tomorrow. The body belongs here. This is what I mean when I say let the body belong to the new state. Do not use the body as evidence of the old one. Do not say, I still feel tension, therefore nothing has changed. No. The body may be learning. Let it learn slowly. You have given it years of one instruction. Brace, watch, prepare, hold. Do not trust. Something may go wrong. Now you are giving another instruction, not with words, but with permission. You may rest. Again, you may rest. Not forever. Not in every situation. Tonight. That is enough. And perhaps the body believes you for one breath. Then it tightens again. Fine. You are not failing. Offer the permission again. Not as command, as invitation. You may rest. Maybe the shoulders respond. Maybe not. Maybe the hand opens. Maybe not. You are not measuring. You are creating another possibility. A body that does not belong entirely to the old state. A body that can participate in peace. This is deeply connected to identity. For the old self does not live only in memory. It lives in posture. It lives in habit. It lives in how you enter a room. It lives in how you wait for an answer. It lives in how you hold the breath before opening a letter. It lives in how you sit when money is discussed. It lives in how you look at someone when you expect to be rejected. And so the new self may also begin physically. Not by acting different. By no longer completing every old posture. Perhaps tomorrow you notice yourself bracing before a conversation. Pause. Let one shoulder drop. Not as a trick, as a reminder. I do not need to enter this room as the old self. Perhaps you are about to open the post and the stomach tightens. Pause. Not to deny the contents. To remember. The envelope does not define me. Perhaps someone is late and you begin listening anxiously. Let the ears stop searching for meaning. The body can become a doorway back into the state. But tonight we keep it simpler. No tomorrow yet. Only this bed. Only this moment. There is nothing to defend against here. If a thought comes, let it come. If tension appears, let it be present without becoming prophecy. The body may carry old weather. You are changing the climate. Weather can pass slowly. No need to rush it. Let the pillow take the head. Let the mattress take the spine. Let the blanket take the weight of the hands. Let the room hold what you no longer need to hold. This is not surrender to circumstances. It is surrender of unnecessary effort. There is a difference. You are not saying, I give up. You are saying, I no longer need to fight tonight. And perhaps the body understands that language better than all the affirmations you could speak. No fight tonight. No defense tonight. No waiting tonight. No calculation tonight. No preparation for rejection tonight. No need to rehearse disappointment. No need to stand guard over the future. Let the body become the body of someone who has already received permission to rest. That is the state. Simple, human, quiet. And perhaps, as you lie here, the new reality begins not with a vision, but with the absence of one old contraction. A hand loosens, a jaw softens, a shoulder sinks, a thought remains unfinished, a breath leaves without immediately preparing for the next fear. That is enough. Let the body belong to this. Let it belong to the state in which nothing has to be defended against for these remaining hours. You do not need to feel transformed. You only need to stop asking the body to keep proving that the old world is still dangerous. Tonight, the body may rest from that duty. Let it. And as it rests, let the state of being defended against become a little less familiar. Let ease become a little more believable. Let quiet become a little more natural. Let the body discover that it can lie here without solving tomorrow. That it can be heavy without being helpless. That it can be still without being defeated. That it can soften without losing control. That it can sleep without abandoning the desire. And perhaps the deepest shift tonight is simply this. The body that once belonged to waiting begins to belong to arrival, not through effort, through rest. You do not have to carry the old state any farther tonight. You have carried it far enough. You carried it through the morning. You carried it through conversations, through decisions, through moments when you appeared calm, and moments when the mind wandered back to the same question. You carried it through things you understood, and things you could not understand. You carried it through the hours in which you tried to be certain, and through the hours in which certainty seemed very far away. But you do not have to carry it into sleep. The person you were this morning does not have to follow you into sleep. Let that person grow quiet now. No struggle, no rejection, no argument. You are not trying to get rid of anyone. You are simply allowing an old way of being to become unnecessary for the night. Perhaps that old self still has a few things to say. Let it speak somewhere far away. You do not have to answer. Perhaps it asks whether tomorrow will really be different. No answer is needed. Perhaps it asks whether you have done enough. No answer. Perhaps it wants to know whether the state has changed, whether the desire is closer, whether the outer world has begun to move. No answer. Those questions can remain unanswered. You are going somewhere quieter than questions. You do not need to know whether anything has shifted. You do not need to examine yourself for evidence. You do not need to search the body for a special feeling. You do not need to ask whether you believed strongly enough. There is nothing to measure now, nothing to calculate, nothing to inspect, nothing to monitor. The night does not ask for a report. Sleep does not require proof. You can simply lie here. And perhaps that simplicity feels unfamiliar. Let it. You have spent so much time trying to become something, obtain something, solve something, understand something, move something, persuade something, that doing nothing may seem strange. But tonight, nothing more is required. The work of this hour is not work. You are not reaching for another life now. You are resting from within it. Feel the difference between those two positions. Reaching has tension in it. Resting does not. Reaching says, it is over there. Resting says nothing. It simply lies down. So let the reaching stop. You do not need to stretch consciousness toward tomorrow. Tomorrow knows how to arrive without your assistance. You do not need to pull an answer toward you. You do not need to pull a person toward you. You do not need to pull money toward you. You do not need to pull opportunity toward you. You do not need to pull a new identity toward you. For these hours, let everything come to rest. The old hands can stop reaching. The old mind can stop leaning forward. The old eyes can stop looking for confirmation. The old ears can stop listening for some final sign. Nothing must happen before you sleep. That may be the most important permission of the night. Nothing must happen before you sleep. You do not have to feel transformed. You do not have to feel powerful. You do not have to feel perfectly secure. You do not have to feel filled with joy. You do not have to produce an emotion worthy of the life you desire. Perhaps you are simply tired. Then be tired. Perhaps there is still a trace of sadness. Let it be there without giving it tomorrow. Perhaps some uncertainty remains. Let it remain without turning it into prophecy. You are allowed to sleep with an unanswered question. You are allowed to sleep before the evidence appears. You are allowed to sleep before the outer world agrees. The state you choose does not need the world to sign its name beneath it tonight. Let the old reactions become quiet, not erased. Quiet. The reaction that used to appear when you thought of money can become quiet. The reaction that used to appear when you thought of that person can become quiet. The reaction that used to appear when you imagined tomorrow can become quiet. The reaction that used to say, but what if, can become quiet. It does not need to disappear dramatically. Let it fade the way a sound fades when you move farther from the room in which it was made. Still there for a moment, then less distinct, then farther away. You do not have to chase the silence. Let the silence come toward you. And if another thought appears, let it appear. A thought is not a command. A memory is not an instruction. A fear is not a prophecy. It can pass through the night without becoming your state. You no longer have to follow every visitor down the corridor. Let thoughts come. Let thoughts go. You remain here, quietly here, and somewhere beneath the passing movements of the mind, another state can become more familiar. Not through effort, through resting there. Perhaps it is the state of belonging, perhaps security, perhaps being wanted, perhaps being supplied, perhaps freedom, perhaps simply the feeling that nothing is wrong with this moment. Do not make the state too large. Let it become small enough to sleep in. A state you can inhabit without thinking about it. A state that does not need a speech. A state that does not need to impress you. The new self may become ordinary now. Let it. You have no need to keep the new self shining before you like some distant ideal. Bring it close. Close enough that it stops being impressive. Close enough that it becomes you. The person who belongs does not spend the night admiring belonging. They sleep. The person who is secure does not spend the night testing security. They sleep. The person who is loved does not spend the night measuring love. They sleep. The person who is supplied does not spend the night counting the future. They sleep. So let sleep itself become the natural expression of the state. You do not have to perform fulfillment. Rest is enough. Let the body belong to it. The shoulders do not need tomorrow upon them. Let them belong to rest. The jaw does not need to hold the old conversation. Let it belong to rest. The hands do not need to grip the answer. Let them belong to rest. The forehead does not need to solve the future. Let it belong to rest. The stomach does not need to prepare for an event that has not happened. Let it belong to rest. And the breath does not need to carry a message. Let it move as it wishes. You are not trying to breathe like the new self. You are allowing the body to discover that it no longer needs to remain on duty. There is no watch to keep tonight, no post to guard, no enemy approaching the room, no verdict arriving before morning. Nothing to defend against now. Let the body understand that slowly. Perhaps it understands through heaviness, perhaps through warmth, perhaps through nothing you can name. There is no correct feeling. You are not waiting for a signal from the body. You are simply no longer asking the body to prove the old state. Let the mind belong to the new state too, not by repeating endlessly, by becoming less interested in the old questions. When? Quiet. How? Quiet. What if? Quiet. Did it work? Quiet. Has anything changed? Quiet. No need to answer. There are answers that become unnecessary when the question itself loses importance. Let the questions lose importance. You are no longer standing outside the door asking whether you may enter. For the purpose of this night, you are inside. No doorway, no road, no distance, nothing to cross. You are resting from within. And if the old self says, "But I do not feel different enough," let that sentence float away too. Different enough for what? There is no examination. No one is grading the night. No one is counting how many minutes you remained in the state. No one is measuring the strength of your feeling. No one is waiting to punish you for a passing doubt. You may stop examining yourself. That examination belonged to the old effort. Let it go. Perhaps the old self thought change required constant supervision. It does not need supervision tonight. Let sleep carry what effort cannot. Let sleep carry the state beyond the point where you can consciously hold it. You do not need to remain awake to protect it. You do not need to repeat one final sentence at the perfect moment. If you forget every word I have spoken before sleep takes you, nothing has gone wrong. You are not memorizing. You are resting. And if only one impression remains, let it be the impression that you are no longer required to be the person you were. You are not required to repeat them. You are not required to defend them. You are not required to wake tomorrow carrying the same weight simply because you carried it today. But even tomorrow is too far away now. Come back. This room, this darkness, this bed, this quiet. No future, no past, only the gentle fading of effort. The old self may become distant. Let it. Do not wave goodbye. Do not make a ceremony of departure. Distance is enough. Perhaps you can remember the old state without feeling compelled to enter it, like a room down a long hallway. The door exists. You do not need to open it. Perhaps there was once a time when you ran toward that door at every sound. Not tonight. Let it remain closed. There is somewhere else to rest. The new state may become ordinary. Let it become so ordinary that there is almost nothing to say about it. You belong. Nothing to say. You are secure. Nothing to explain. You are wanted. Nothing to prove. You are supplied. Nothing to calculate. You are free. Nothing to announce. You have arrived inwardly. Nothing to celebrate. Just rest. This is where the language can begin to become smaller. There has been enough language, enough explanation, enough understanding. You do not need another idea. You do not need another method. You do not need another reason. The day has given you enough words. Let the night begin taking them away. A little less thought, a little less effort, a little less interest in the old story. The old story can continue without an audience. You do not need to sit in the front row. Let the theater empty. The lights can go out. The actors can leave. No more performance tonight. No more proving that you were hurt. No more proving that you were rejected. No more proving that things were difficult. No more proving that you did not have enough. No more proving that tomorrow must resemble yesterday. The case is closed for the night. The papers can remain where they are. The old evidence is not required in bed. Nothing more to present. Nothing more to defend. Nothing more to explain. Perhaps you spent years explaining the old self to yourself. Why you worry. Why you wait. Why you expect what you expect. Why you became this way. Those explanations may all have their place, but not now. Now you can rest without understanding every part of your history. You do not need to know exactly how an old state was formed before you stop sleeping in it. You can simply choose not to renew it tonight. No renewal, no rehearsal, no continuation. Let the night interrupt it. The person you were this morning does not have to follow you into sleep. Perhaps that person was tired before the day even began. Perhaps they opened their eyes and immediately remembered the problem. Perhaps the whole day unfolded beneath that memory. Let them rest now. Do not hate them. They were doing what they knew. Let them sleep too. But you do not need to wake them every few minutes with another problem. Let the old self sleep until it becomes impossible to tell where it ended and where something quieter began. You do not have to decide the exact moment you become new. That is too much observation. Perhaps there is no exact moment you can recognize. Perhaps one state simply grows dim as another becomes natural, like night itself. You do not know the precise instant daylight is gone. The room simply becomes darker. The old self can disappear like that. No announcement, no final argument, just less and less visible. And the new state can arrive the same way, not as lightning, as familiarity, as quiet, as the absence of the old question, as a body that has stopped bracing, as a mind that has stopped checking, as a person who has forgotten to wait. Let it happen without watching. You do not watch yourself fall asleep. You cannot. At some point, observation ends. Let this change be allowed the same privacy. You do not need to watch it occur. You do not need to know whether it occurred. You do not need to wake yourself inwardly by asking, "Am I there yet?" There is no yet now. There is only rest. You are not reaching for another life now. You are resting from within it. No need to picture the whole life. No need to see the house. No need to see the person. No need to see the money. No need to see the work. No need to see the answer. The state can remain after the pictures disappear. Let the images disappear. Let the rooms disappear. Let the faces disappear. Let the words disappear. Keep only the quiet position, inside, not outside, at home. Not traveling, received, not waiting, settled, not searching, nothing to force, nothing to prove, nothing to monitor. If the world is moving, let it move without your supervision. If nothing visible is moving, let that be none of your concern tonight. The world may keep its own schedule. You are sleeping. That is enough. The old self wanted to manage the bridge, wanted to know every step, wanted to know who would call, what would happen, which door would open, which person would change, how the money would come, how the opportunity would appear. Let those questions fall away. The bridge does not need your conscious construction tonight. You do not have to stand beneath it measuring every stone. Rest at the end, quietly. The means can remain unseen. The road can remain unseen. The next step can remain unseen. You do not need light upon the whole road in order to sleep. Let the road be dark. You are not walking it now. You are resting. And perhaps there is still a small part of you that wants one final reassurance. It says, tell me that everything will be all right. I would rather give you something quieter. You do not need to know everything tonight. You do not need to settle every future before sleep. You do not need to possess certainty about every circumstance. You can rest in the state you choose without demanding that the future explain itself. That is enough. You can rest in being the one who belongs. Enough. The one who is no longer waiting for permission. Enough. The one who does not need to carry yesterday farther. Enough. The one who can allow life to remain mysterious without making mystery into danger. Enough. Let that be enough. No more enlarging the desire. No more enlarging the problem. No more enlarging the night. Small now. Very small. The weight of the head on the pillow. The weight of the body on the bed. A breath. Then another. No need to count. No need to follow. The room can become farther away. The day can become farther away. The voice can become farther away. The old self can become farther away. Nothing is being lost. Only distance. Let the distance grow. Perhaps a thought about tomorrow appears. It can remain at the edge. No need to bring it closer. Perhaps a thought about yesterday. Edge. Perhaps a person. Edge. Perhaps money. Edge. Perhaps work. Edge. You are not refusing anything. You are simply not moving toward it. There is no reason to move now. No reaching. No chase. No watch. No rehearsal. The new state does not need attention every second to remain yours. Let it stay quietly beneath everything, like the room beneath darkness. You do not see every object. It is still there. You do not need to see the state clearly now. Let it remain. Let sleep cover it. Let sleep carry what effort cannot. There is nothing brave required of you. No final leap. No perfect conviction. No dramatic surrender. Just less effort. And then less. The old state can become quiet. The new state can become familiar. The body can belong to it. The mind can belong to it. And now even those words are almost too much. Let them go. No more rehearsing. No more waiting. No more checking. Nothing to force. Nothing to prove. Nothing to watch. Nothing to repair tonight. Nothing to become tonight. You have done enough. Rest as the new you. Not the perfect you. Not the future you. The quiet you. The one who is no longer carrying the old state farther. Rest there. Let the day be over. Let the questions be over. Let the effort be over. Let tomorrow come later. Not now. Later. Quiet now. No need to think about whether you are secure. Rest. No need to think about whether you belong. Rest. No need to think about whether you are loved. Rest. No need to think about whether there is enough. Rest. No need to think about the state at all. Rest. The new self may become so quiet that you no longer notice it. Good. Let naturalness take the place of effort. Let ordinary replace extraordinary. Let having replace reaching. Let being replace becoming. Quiet now. The old story can fade. The old voice can fade. The old face you carried in imagination can fade. The old anticipation can fade. No need to hurry it. Let it fade at its own pace. You are not watching anymore. No more rehearsing. No more waiting. No more checking. Rest as the new you. Let tomorrow meet you there. Not because you will force tomorrow to become something. Simply because you do not have to meet tomorrow as yesterday's self. But tomorrow is not here. So leave it. Nothing more to become tonight. Nothing more to understand. Nothing more to imagine. Nothing more to say. Quiet now. Rest. Let the mind become dim. Let the words become distant. Let even the desire become quiet. What is yours inwardly does not need to be held tightly. Release the grip. No need to keep it awake. No need to keep yourself awake. The state can sleep with you. The wish can become quiet with you. The whole world can remain outside this room for a while. You are not watching it. You are not asking it for anything. You are not trying to change it now. You have changed where you rest within yourself. That is enough. And now even that can be forgotten. Forget the lesson. Forget the method. Forget the words. Forget the question of frequency. Forget whether anything shifted. You do not need to know. Sleep does not ask what you know. Let the old self become distant. Let the new self become ordinary. Let ordinary become quiet. Let quiet become sleep. No more rehearsing. No more waiting. No more checking. Rest. Quiet now. Nothing more to become tonight. Nothing more to prove. Nothing more to hold. Nothing more. Sleep.